Chapter 271, Unknown Hero, Funeral. An unknown hero. Aiden murmured. Sirius slumped in his chair, hiding his face in his hands. Okay, Kriaker, can you still find the place where Regulus died? Aiden asked. Of course. Kriaker responded. Take us to him, now, immediately, I command you. Sirius stood up and grabbed Kriaker's clothes. But it's full of dark magic left behind by the dark arts. Kriaker cringed. We are responsible for dealing with the magic, you just need to lead us there, Aiden explained. Okay. Kriaker nodded. Aiden and Sirius looked at each other and both grabbed Kriaker's hand. After a space change, the two were sent to a cave. Here, where is he? Sirius asked Kriaker. Master Regulus fell into the water, and there are many corpses underneath. Kriaker shrank into a ball. Sirius ran straight towards the water. But as soon as he touched the water, he was surrounded by a biting cold. His body stiffened and he fell straight into the water. A long staff appeared in Aiden's hand, the tip of the staff glowed slightly, and several chains shot out, tied up Sirius and pulled him back to the shore. What is this thing? Sirius, shivering from the cold, couldn't speak clearly. I told you there was dark magic down there, yet you still rushed forward like that. Look, it's activated. Aiden raised his wand and a ball of light flew to the top of the cave, illuminating the entire cave. In the lake, there are endless streams of corpses climbing up. Okay, now you have to carefully identify which one is your brother. If it's not you, I will cremate them all. Aiden waved his wand, and a halo of blue flame surrounded the three people. A yin corpse walked in front, pounced on the three people, and then turned into ashes in the fierce fire. Sirius stared at the group of Inferi with wide eyes, afraid that if he missed, his brother's body would be reduced to ashes. As time went on, more and more Inferi were cremated. The ashes from the burnt piled up into a small circle around the three people. I see it, Regulus, Aiden, at your 11 o'clock. Sirius suddenly shouted. Aiden looked in the direction Sirius had shouted and saw a corpse in a dark green robe moving towards them. With a hook of his finger, the corpse flew towards them. Snap! Aiden snapped his fingers, and several white chains tied up the corpse. Then he raised his wand and pointed it at the stone platform in the center of the cave. A complex magic circle appeared at the tip of the wand, and magic power gathered towards the center. A wave of attack magic roared through the stone platform and penetrated the entire cave. Kriaker, let's go! Aiden shouted. Kriaker immediately ran over, grabbed everyone, and disappeared in a flash of space. At this moment, Voldemort, who was far away in Europe, suddenly felt that his spell was broken and immediately stood up. Master, where are you going? A black-robed Death Eater beside him asked. He lowered his head, thinking that his lewd look went unnoticed. However, as a legilimency master, Voldemort already knew everything. With a wave of the magic wand, a Cruciatus curse was cast. Don't think I don't know what's on your mind. I'm going back to England. After saying this, Voldemort disappeared into the night without saying a word. When she arrived at the cave, there was only a huge hole left, and the lake and the stone platform were all turned into ashes by Aiden's attack. No! The unwilling howl echoed in the night. On the other side, Sirius was crying on the ground holding Regulus's body. What's wrong? The huge noise woke everyone up. Who is this? Harry felt very strange when he saw the pale corpse in front of him. The second son of the Black family, a hero who sacrificed his life against Voldemort. After answering everyone's questions, Aiden took off his hat and placed it on his chest. The next day, Sirius informed Dumbledore by letter. Dumbledore hurried to the Black ancestral home. I already know the situation. Let's give him a funeral, Dumbledore suggested. After some decorations, the members of the Order of the Phoenix gathered at the Black family cemetery. Although the confrontation with Voldemort intensified, all 20 members of the Order of the Phoenix attended the funeral. Dumbledore wore black robes, which was rare for him, and the others also wore suits. Today, we suffered a great loss. A warrior who hid in the darkness and fought against Voldemort lost his life. Dumbledore's voice was dull and low. He is as unknown as his name, but we will never forget his sacrifice, because forgetting means betrayal. Dumbledore's voice was uplifting, encouraging everyone. Thanks to his efforts, we are one step closer to killing Voldemort, so please remember him, remember his name Regulus Arcturus Black. Then, Dumbledore waved his wand, and Regulus' coffin slowly sank into the pit. The surrounding soil and rocks gently isolated him from the world, and this hero finally found peace after 13 years. Aiden was wearing a well-tailored black suit. He took the flower off his chest pocket and placed it in front of Regulus' tombstone, and observed a moment of silence for him. I really didn't expect. Tears flashed in Sirius' eyes. Harry, supporting Sirius at his side, felt the pain his godfather was feeling. Aiden stood up and prepared to leave, but a black-robed figure appeared beside him. I heard from Sirius that you got something from Creaker. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows. Senior Tom's Horcrux. Aiden knew what Dumbledore was up to. Would you like to go and see it together? Dumbledore asked. Walk. Reaching out and grabbing Dumbledore, the two of them made their way through the ocean of collective subconsciousness back to the Black Mansion. Can you still use it like this? No place where there is consciousness can stop you. Dumbledore asked. No, you can raise a mental barrier to resist me, but whether it will be broken depends on how far the person has walked on the spiritual path. Aiden explained. Then he led Dumbledore down the stairs, with Dumbledore bowing slightly to Creaker. The two came to the top floor. Originally there was a zombie there, but because the floor was divided into multiple layers, it could not see Aiden now. In the attic on top of the old Blake house, Aiden set up a complicated alchemical matrix. In the middle of the matrix was placed Slytherin's locket. Are we going to clean up Tom's soul again like last time? Asked Dumbledore. No, I left a hint for Salazar, so he should have made some preparations for it in advance. Aiden said mysteriously. For some reason, Dumbledore always felt strange hearing Aiden calling the founder by his name. Chapter 272, Spring Cleaning and Heading to the Ministry of Magic. After handing the locket to Dumbledore, Aiden returned to the Black Mansion. Lupin was taken away by Dumbledore to carry out a secret mission. Before leaving, he asked Aiden for a copy of the Pruitt family crest with a magical mark. There are still 3 days until Harry's hearing, and the people at the Black Mansion who have nothing to do decide to do a general cleaning. By the way, don't you have a house elf at home? Aiden, wearing a mask and apron, waved a wand to clean up the dust. Creaker never cleans the house, and every time I clean he secretly hides some garbage. Sirius complained. Aiden looked at Sirius with a teasing look for a while, and only continued to clean the house until he slipped away embarrassedly. Aiden lifted the sofa with one hand and found a large area of dead cattail fluff on the ground. Sirius drew aside the curtains, and a large group of vixens ran out from behind them. A certain dragon felt the hairs of his body stand on end when he saw a large group of black-haired pests the size of southern cockroaches rushing towards him. Whoosh! A breath of dragon blew out, freezing the entire curtain. Oh my god, are you going to kill me? Sirius put down his wand, and the shield charm in front of him had turned into a large ball of ice. At least we got rid of Vixen, didn't we? Aiden blinked. Then the two of them used a cleaning spell to get rid of the ice debris around them. Ron, Harry, and Hermione were cleaning out the cupboards in the attic. Harry opened the cupboard door and suddenly a big black spider crawled out. Ron's expression changed drastically. Well, I'm a little thirsty. I'm going out to have a cup of tea. Then he disappeared for a full hour. By the time Mundungus returned with the information about Nocturne Alley, the entire old house had been completely renovated. Oh, Sirius, can you give me these useless garbage? Mundungus showed a mercenary smile. Aiden glanced at him and saw through his intentions. Those silver items are very valuable. If you want to deal with them, you can go to a regular shop in Diagon Alley. Aiden reminded. Oh. Mundungus made a disappointed sound. Okay, what are you doing here? Sirius seemed to hate him. Information about Nocturne Alley. The actual controller of Nocturne Alley now seems to be planning to lean towards the mysterious man. Mundungus did not waste time and told them the information. Okay, I got it. We will inform Dumbledore. After hearing the information, Sirius sent Mundungus away directly. Silverware, think about it. Before leaving, Mundungus still remembered the silverware of the Black family. Then he was kicked out of the room and Sirius slammed the door behind him. Sirius, why do you hate him so much? Harry asked curiously. He's a hypocrite, a thief, and a gangster. Harry, you'd better have less contact with him. Sirius warned seriously. Oh, by the way, I suddenly remembered something. How is your occlumency training going? Aiden suddenly showed a teacher's look and looked at the two of them seriously. Having experienced teaching at Hogwarts in the past, Aiden can now completely transform into Professor McGonagall. The same aura made Sirius and Harry instantly return to the college and begin to tremble. "I'm studying, Mike." "No, Aiden," Harry said stutteringly. "Let me check it out." Aiden gave him a direct look. The magic power attached to their thoughts, and the power of telepathy seemed to be able to pry open their defenses. However, Aiden felt a small resistance, however weak. "Well, you guys didn't slack off. You have to remember." Just as Aiden was about to speak, the two of them were able to skillfully continue his words. "Voldemort is a powerful telepath. You can't learn occlumency or even stand in front of him," Harry replied. "Good." Aiden nodded. Harry's hearing is scheduled for Monday. On this day, Harry was still awakened by nightmares and sat at the dining table eating bread and marmalade. Aiden ate the oatmeal muffins, smoked fish bacon and fried eggs prepared by Mrs. Molly without any hesitation. After eating, the four of them dressed neatly and walked towards the London subway station. Along the way, Arthur was like a curious child. The crowds, revolving doors, and ticket machines made him extremely excited, which formed a sharp contrast with Harry, who was frowning next to him. On the subway, Harry said to Sirius. "Sirius, if we are expelled, can we live with you at the Black House? You would rather come to the Black Mansion than go back to those damn muggles." Obviously Sirius's focus was not the same as Harry's. Aiden teased Arthur, "Uncle, the reason you took the subway is because you want to see the technology of ordinary people. Don't tell Harry." Arthur winked at him. Walking through the crowds, out of the tube station, to a red telephone booth between Downing Street and the Houses of Parliament. Arthur squeezed in with 3 people and pressed the phone on the phone booth. The phone booth sank, carrying the 4 people into the ministry's visitor lobby. The entire hall is paved with black stone bricks, and there are many golden sculptures around it. There were 2 fountains in the middle, with a wizard standing in the middle of the pools, and house elves, centaurs, and goblins beside him looking at him with admiration. Aiden felt inexplicably that the wizard looked familiar. Then, a man in a platinum robe appeared behind Aiden and tried to put his hands on Aiden's shoulders. But the next moment, he felt as if he had traveled back and forth between dreams and reality dozens of times. "Director." "Hat, little brat." Aiden smiled proudly. "Aiden, who are you talking to?" The 3 people next to him were very curious, and Sirius asked boldly. Then, the director walked up to the few people, from virtual to real. "Hello, I'm the director of the Department of Mysteries." The director gave a wizard salute to the few people. "This guy is one of us. He will help us vote later." Aiden introduced him to them. Harry immediately felt much better when he heard this, and he was more pleased with the director's mysterious behavior. Several people set off for the Wizengamot on the ground floor, and the director used some kind of special communication to chat with Aiden. "Hiss, why are you reciting my prayer for no reason?" Aiden raised his left eyebrow slightly. "Isn't it that there are some little secrets that I don't want to share with them?" The director blinked. "If you have something to say, please say it quickly." "If you have." Aiden replied. "What exactly do you want to do now?" "I am beginning to be confused about your thoughts," the director asked. As Aiden's influence and power continue to grow, the director becomes curious as to why Aiden continues to play Game of Thrones with those bugs at the ministry. "The order built by great power will not last long. I need a bottom-up, spontaneous change by everyone," Aiden replied. The director wanted to ask something else, but unfortunately a group of people had already arrived at the door of Arthur's office. Chapter 273, Clown Tricks and Hearings. Arthur's office was very small, filled with all kinds of muggle items, and there were several posters on the walls. The sharp-eyed Aiden also saw a diagram of the engine's structure. A small paper airplane flew to the director's ear, and a voice was played from it. "Director, the trial has been moved forward, and the venue has been changed from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement to the Wizengamot. Fudge has also temporarily summoned all Wizengamot members." The voice that came from the paper plane was Oliver's. Judging from the footsteps in the voice, it seemed that the notification was sent in a hurry. Aiden glanced back at Harry. "Fudge didn't send you any notification?" "No." Harry began to understand the filthiness of this. "That damn politician," Sirius snapped. "Hurry up and go to the Wizengamot, there's still time," Aiden said. "I'll leave Harry to you," Arthur said to the director and Aiden. The group rushed to the Wizengamot without stopping. At the gate, the director wanted to follow them in, but was stopped by Aiden. The director looked at Aiden in confusion. Don't go in directly, it will expose your relationship with us. Aiden explained. Harry walked in and sat on a chair. The surrounding platforms were crowded with people. Amelia Bones gave Fudge an impatient look. Then, the director arrived late. Fudge on the stage frowned, but he knocked the gavel and began the trial. Aiden stood outside the door and sensed that a huge source of magic power was approaching him. Waiting for me, said Dumbledore. Aren't you afraid that your students will be taken advantage of by them? Aiden said with a double meaning. Just them. Dumbledore raised the corner of his mouth, not knowing who he was referring to. In the courtroom, Fudge kept reading his own name and those of his colleagues, trying to put pressure on Harry. Then, Aiden broke in first. It's quite lively. A certain dragon smiled sweetly to the entire judgment seat. Although the smile was sweet, some people on the stage felt a chill for some reason. Who are you and why are you interfering in the court? Fudge wanted to take the opportunity to drive Aiden out. I am Aiden Imperial Pruitt, recipient of the Order of Merlin, 2nd class, creator of the Transfiguration spell, creator of the Werewolf Curse, and also the head of the Pruitt family. Aiden's long title immediately suppressed Fudge's momentum. He leaned lightly against the fence of the courtroom to express his disdain for them. Oh, by the way, I am a witness in this case, according to the magic regulations. That's enough, you stay. Fudge had no way to deal with this troublemaker. Aiden smiled and prepared to watch the show. We will now judge the criminal Harry James Potter, of 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. And of course his advocate, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Dumbledore walked to the middle, waved his wand and conjured up 2 pink-polished armchairs with printed cotton cushions, sat down on them, and extended his hand to invite Aiden. When it comes to sarcasm, the old ones are the most experienced. Aiden sat down decisively and took out the lemon juice and handed it to Dumbledore. Looking at the afternoon tea set in front of him, Fudge was furious. That's enough. You are no longer the president of the International Confederation of Wizards and the chief wizard of the Wizengamot. Now show me some respect. The poor clown had no idea who he was yelling at, but unfortunately the afternoon tea duo had no intention of giving him any respect. In order to prevent the hearing from becoming a laughing stock, Ms. Amelia Bones next to her had no choice but to snatch Fudge's hammer and hit it hard. Fudge calmed down and instructed Percy to get the trial materials. Percy walked out with his head down, not daring to meet Aiden's eyes. Aiden's cousin broke with his family in pursuit of power, had a big fight with Arthur, and moved out. Later, when Mrs. Molly went to find him, he responded coldly. Aiden was so angry that he punched him and pinned him to the wall. In the end, it was Mrs. Molly who pulled him away. Now, Percy's relationship with his family has reached a freezing point. Percy lowered his head and brought the materials to the trial table. Fudge flipped through the documents and began to ask questions. You are Harry James Potter, and you were given a warning 3 years ago for using magic, Fudge asked. Yes, but that's... Elf, Harry began but was interrupted. And you used the Patronus charm again this time, right? Fudge pressed on. Yes, but that's because... Dementors, Harry wanted to explain but was interrupted again. You know, you can't use magic outside of school if you're under 17, right? Fudge smiled. Yes, but... Defense. You know you were in a Muggle gathering place at the time, and there was a Muggle with you when you cast the spell, right? Fudge felt confident of victory. Yes, but... Suburbs, relatives. Well, fellow wizards of the Wizengamot, we... Death penalty, Fudge was about to speak, but it was Harry's turn to interrupt him. I used the Patronus because there were Dementors around, Harry shouted. Dementors? Amelia Bones repeated, catching the point. Muggles can't see Dementors, right? You're lying. Fudge wanted to pin Harry to death. Perhaps we should talk about Dementors. A child under the age of 17 who can use such pure white magic should not be a habitual liar. Amelia Bones said. How do you know? Fudge wanted to change the subject. But this time it was his turn to be interrupted. Aiden said. Dear wise Wizengamot wizards, are you willing to give this boy with profound attainments in white magic a chance to prove himself? Please give us your votes. The wizards on the stage thought for a while and raised their hands. Then, as the first witness, I will present my evidence. Aiden took out a photo stone. Fudge's eyes widened immediately and he looked at Umbridge, who shook her head vigorously at him. The scene of the photo stone played, and the scene came to Azkaban, where 2 people in black robes expelled 6 Dementors. 6 Dementors were driven all the way to Little Whinging and attacked Harry. The most important thing is that the viewing angle of the photo stone slowly approaches the 2 men in black robes, taking a clear picture of their faces. The 2 were the Aurors guarded by senior officials of the Ministry of Magic, organized by Fudge and controlled by Umbridge. As we all know, videos from the magic world cannot be photoshopped. As soon as these 2 faces appeared, all eyes were focused on Fudge's face. Besides, the Ministry of Magic probably has no record of detecting Harry Potter using magic. Aiden narrowed his eyes. Someone witnessed it. They saw Harry Potter casting a spell as they passed by. We can provide proof. Fudge hurriedly changed the subject and tried to bring the incident back to his own track. Chapter 274. Timely cut, semi-disclosure, ending. Ahem, Umbridge, there are serious omissions in the management of subordinates. You are temporarily relieved of your position as Deputy Minister. Fudge continued to order. However, according to magic regulations, a single piece of evidence cannot be used as the basis for a final decision. Fudge wanted to struggle. Unfortunately, his clownish behavior only earned him more contempt. Well, I have a witness here, don't I? Dumbledore snapped his fingers and the door of the Wizengamot opened automatically. Mrs. Fig came in and Dumbledore stood up and offered his chair to her. Oh, you want her to testify? Ace quib, Fudge sneered. Mrs. Fig pulled out RP, a magic wand from her bag, and some people laughed when they saw this. Call the gods to protect you. Mrs. Fig's wand tip lit up and a British blue cat patroness scurried out in front of her wand. This is impossible. A large group of people stood up in shock. She's just a squib, that doesn't make sense. Fudge's glasses fell to the ground and broke, but he was so shocked that he didn't notice it at all. How did you become a wizard? Some people couldn't wait to catch Mrs. Fig and torture her. Aiden frowned, raised the fingers of his right hand, and tapped them lightly on the armchair, the sound echoing in the Wizengamot. In an instant, all the emotions in everyone's hearts were instantly blank. He entered the sage time without any motivation, and even his fear of Aiden disappeared. Gentlemen, I know you are all eager to explore the secrets of Ms. Fig. After all, who can guarantee that there will be no squibs in future generations? But the focus now is Mr. Harry Potter's case, isn't it? Aiden stood up and wandered around the courtroom. A complex picture appeared in his hand, and everyone's attention was attracted by this picture. Well, it's time for this farce to come to an end. Those who agree that Harry Potter is guilty raise your hands. Ms. Bones couldn't stand Fudge's use of the Holy Tribunal as a means of retaliation, so she simply pushed the case forward. Of the people present, only Fudge and Umbridge raised their hands. Oh, it looks like this lady has been fired, so her vote shouldn't count. Aiden raised an eyebrow at Umbridge. Then he happily watched her smiling face twist and swell. Now, raise your hands if you disagree that Harry Potter is guilty. Most of the wizards in the Wizengamot raised their hands. The farce was over and Fudge was unable to resist the consciousness of the majority of people, otherwise the blessing on him would disappear. Dumbledore took out his wand and made the floral chair disappear. He greeted them curtly and turned away. Harry called out to the professor, but unfortunately he didn't turn around. Aiden also wanted to leave, but Fudge stopped him. Mr. Pruitt, the means of transforming ordinary people into wizards should be under the control of the Ministry of Magic. Fudge said condescendingly. Aiden left without looking back, raised a middle finger at Fudge and left him with a mocking back. The wizards of the Wizengamot chased after him, leaving Fudge alone, furious. Minister. Umbridge came over pitifully. You will be the general manager of my shop in Diagon Alley. After you have accumulated a certain amount of political achievements, I will transfer you to the Department of Incidental Magical Disasters. Fudge left a word and then walked out. In the hall of the Ministry of Magic, Aiden dealt with enthusiastic wizards one by one. Finally, he was so tired that he could only use psychological invisibility to create an illusion to deal with them. He and the director sat in the lounge nearby drinking tea. So, why are you suddenly asking me to release the technology? Aiden asked. There are too many of them. If we continue like this, we will be discovered. The director smiled bitterly. What do you mean? Aiden was confused. We have converted a total of 300,000 wizards during this period of time. The director revealed an astronomical figure. What? Why are there so many? Aiden frowned. The king of the deep world recovered too quickly. We cut the core a second time and reached an agreement with the guardians of other regions to jointly transform the wizard. Now there are expected transformation wizards all over Europe, and most parts of Africa have also begun trial transformation. The director explained. Where are so many wizards hiding? Won't it lead to a large-scale exposure incident? Aiden asked. Use the untraceable extension charm and the confusion charm to hide them for the time being. There are reports of large-scale disappearances among Muggles, but unfortunately their top brass don't seem to care much. The director spread his hands. You guys only target countries with large populations, right? Aiden rolled up his eyes, which looked like crescent moons. The director also smiled and took a sip of the tea. The communication between the two foxes did not need to be so detailed. Harry's hearing finally ended, and Sirius escorted him all the way to King's Cross Station. Well, it seems I can only take you here. Sirius said. I'll write you a letter. Harry gave him a hug. But where is your luggage? Sirius asked curiously. Aiden said he hid his luggage in his dreams. Sirius, do you know what kind of magic this is? Harry said to Sirius, Coach, I want to learn this. Well, it may be a family heirloom. But it doesn't matter. I will teach you all the magic of the Black family in the future. Sirius patted his chest to ease the embarrassment. The train whistle sounded, and the little wizards got on the train one after another. With the blessings and expectations of their loved ones, the Hogwarts train set out on its journey. Well, look who this is. After a summer vacation, she seems to be more charming. A familiar voice sounded in the private room. I was already immune to this word when I was 6, Edmund, Aiden said, putting the book down. See, I told you he wouldn't react, just give me the money. Ethan popped up from behind. Tisk. Edmund reluctantly took out 10 nuts and handed them to Ethan. You two actually used me as a gambler. Aiden pounced forward with a dragon roar. He did it first. Ethan decisively betrayed Edmund. You are an ungrateful guy. Edmund turned around to avoid the dragon's attack and turned to pounce on Ethan. Several people were playing and fighting in the private room. The train did not arrive at Hogwarts until night. It was the beginning of a new school year, and many young wizards, led by Professor McGonagall, went to the lake to take a boat ride. Professor McGonagall. Aiden tilted his head. Maybe Hagrid is sick, it's really rare. Edmund sighed. The few of them crossed the path and came to the woods behind the station to wait for the carriage. Merlin, what is this? Edmund suddenly cried out in fright. You can't believe you can only see the Thestrals now. Ethan smiled. What? Edmund asked in confusion. A magical animal that can only be seen by people who have witnessed death. Did you witness anyone's death during your holidays? Aiden asked. Someone raided our family during the holidays, and that person was shot dead by the guards who accompanied us. Edmund recalled those hateful eyes in his mind. Then you have to strengthen security, after all, the storm is coming. Aiden said. Chapter 275. At this year's dinner, the old hat composed a very long song, using the departure of one of the founders, Salazar Slytherin, to warn the young wizards of the importance of unity. After the song was over, Professor McGonagall led the little wizards into the hall. No one noticed that a dragon was chatting with a hat. What's wrong, old hat, this is not like you. Aiden started chatting with him. Watch him being brought to the heads of various little wizards again and again. Aiden, I have witnessed batches of young wizards leaving Hogwarts over the past 1,000 years, and I used to be extremely proud of my work. But now, facing Hogwarts like this, I began to wonder if it was my special division into different houses that led to the current division in the wizarding world. Although Old Hat was still conducting the branching on the surface, Aiden secretly connected an optical cable to him and the two chatted together. Hat, remember the blessing they gave you when you were taken off Godric's head? Aiden asked. Well, discover the characteristics of the little wizards and let them become who they want to be according to their hearts. The Sorting Hat replied. The branch next door had already finished, so Aiden sat over and stroked the edge of his old hat. So, don't think that you can solve all the problems from the root with just one hat. The more you think like that, the easier it is to fall into nothingness. So don't be afraid. Besides, I'm still here. I won't let their efforts go to waste. Aiden smiled confidently at the old man. Yeah, it's a good thing you're here, it's a good thing. Old Hat seemed tired and fell silent. After a while, Dumbledore walked up to the podium and gave a speech to the young wizards at the beginning of the school year. Good evening, little wizards. This year we have 2 changes in the teaching staff. First, we welcome the return of Professor Grubbly Plank. She will be the Professor of Care of Magical Creatures. Dumbledore pointed to a witch in a grey robe and short grey hair, and everyone applauded. Also, we will be welcoming our new defense against the dark arts professor, Dolores Umbridge. Of course Filch asked me to warn you. Dumbledore was interrupted by a toad-like cough before he could finish his words. Then, Umbridge stood up from her seat and began to deliver a short Ilts-like essay. Thank you, Principal, for your warm welcome. I believe I will get along very well with you young, energetic, and enthusiastic little faces. You just watch her cause trouble in school. Aiden created an illusion for Dumbledore. Dumbledore glanced at him calmly. Seeing that Dumbledore didn't say anything, Aiden spoke again. They can't find us. I allocated some computing power to them. Then what else can we do? Train the students into soldiers to fight the Ministry of Magic? This is a school. Dumbledore found that no one could notice anything unusual, so he sat on the stage with Aiden. The Ministry of Magic has always believed that educating young wizards is very important, and the headmasters in recent years have been very avant-garde, but now, this progress for the sake of progress must stop. Umbridge was still speaking non-stop. Below the stage, Hermione and Edmund, who both had a keen sense of smell, simultaneously realized the truth that the Ministry of Magic wanted to interfere with the school's teaching. The successive principals in recent years have been calling people names and scolding them, Aiden said with a silly smile. Dumbledore shrugged innocently and reached out to take the coconut ice cream that Aiden handed over. Let us keep what we should keep, improve what we should improve, and abandon what we should abandon. Umbridge shrank her neck and snorted, then walked back to the table. Dinner is served, announced the illusion of Dumbledore. It's cliché, hollow, political, and hollows out the role, and then you can meddle in the affairs of Hogwarts at will. This is an old tactic used by politicians. You wouldn't be stupid enough to allow them to do whatever they want with this school. Aiden commented. But he found that Dumbledore did not respond to him. Aiden. You know, I don't have that much energy anymore. If someone can help run this school, why not? Dumbledore's eyelids twitched slightly at Aiden. I guarantee you they will destroy this school. Aiden frowned. But the hidden founder will not just watch his hard work go wrong like this. Dumbledore decided to pass the buck. This is an irresponsible attitude of yours. Long began to get anxious. Alas, it's useless to exaggerate. The old bee was about to slip away. That night, a conflict broke out between Harry and Seamus in Gryffindor, and it was Ron who used his authority as a prefect to calm the conflict. In the room of requirement, Dumbledore, Madame Pomfrey, Snape, Aiden, and Dumbledore were already there, and Neville was the last to arrive. Also present were 2 old acquaintances Severin Wendell and Elena Sophia. So, you're saying that you want to help people with locked minds rebuild their minds. How is that possible? Severin felt a little unbelievable. But the person in charge of St. Mungo's dares to hand the patients over to him, which means he has recognized his abilities. Elena said to herself. So, why did this Ravenclaw genius call me here in the middle of the night? Snape crossed his arms. It will require the care of you and Madame Pomfrey, as well as 2 St. Mungo's physicians. I need to perform a little surgery on their minds. Aiden pinched his index finger and thumb. Madame Pomfrey, who had communicated with Aiden, already knew what Aiden meant, so she explained. His surgery should affect his body to some extent. We need to take care of him and suppress his magic riot. So, what about the division of labor? Snape realized something was wrong as soon as he opened his mouth. Everyone looked at him with expectant expressions. Well, Professor Dumbledore and Professor Snape will be responsible for controlling the magic, the 2 doctors will be responsible for repairing the physical damage in a timely manner, and Madame Pomfrey will be responsible for filling in the gaps, okay. Aiden immediately arranged the tasks for several people, and seeing that everyone had no objection, he took Neville's hand and brought him into his parents' consciousness. In the ocean of collective subconsciousness, 2 very strange islands appeared in front of the 2. Aiden released the mythical creature form, carrying Neville and soaring above the island. The 2 islands were black in color, with no bubbles rising from them, and were covered with thick thorns. At the same time, many parts of the island appeared missing or inverted. "Are you ready, Neville?" Aiden asked. "Well, and no matter what the result is, I would like to thank you on behalf of the Longbottom family. Grandma asked me to tell you these words." In the first sentence, Aiden thought that Gryffindor's Swordmaster was going to come online, but in the second sentence, he turned back to his original form. There was no choice but to take Neville through a layer of crystal shield and enter his father's island of consciousness. Chapter 276. Phase 2 Project Firewall of the Mind. "Let me take a look." Aiden pulled Neville into the depths of the island. "The space here is very messy, filled with fragments of memories." "Neville, am I going to extract your memory?" Aiden reminded. "Come on." Neville prepared to take off his clothes. "Hey, wait, stop, who taught you this?" Aiden hurried to stop Neville to prevent the book from being banned. "George and Fred said." Neville scratched his head embarrassedly. "These two guys." Aiden clenched his fists. "Don't make any unnecessary movements. Calm down and just stand there. I promise you won't get hurt." Aiden comforted him. Walking up to Neville, Aiden raised his hand and thrust it directly into Neville's head. Carefully taking out his memory, a golden ball of light was caught in Aiden's hand. "Is this a wizard?" The mind, which takes precedence over the soul, carries all the wizard's records. Even if the body has not yet developed and the soul cannot remember everything, a pure heart can still preserve love. Aiden looked at the ball of light in his hand and analyzed the information from it. "Aiden, are you okay?" Neville, who had his eyes closed, felt that the surroundings were too quiet, so he asked. "It's ready." Aiden's voice entered Neville's ears. When Neville opened his eyes, he saw a god standing there holding a golden ball of light in his hands. Thin lines extended from the ball of light, radiating in all directions. Countless lines connect the entire island, piecing together the broken parts of the island bit by bit. Neville was stunned by the scene and didn't know what to say. Aiden lifted the ball of light and let it slowly fly over the island. "We have already found a fixed point, now let's move on." His slender palm grabbed in the air, and a long silver-white staff appeared in his hand. "Place the long staff in the center of the island, and the white light will spread out in all directions." The white light gathered on the ground, outlining an alchemical matrix with strange runes. Divine Gift Vunjo, Justice Rado, Cycle Jera, Defense Iwaz, Protection. Spiritual Guidance Algiz. 5 glimmering runes rose from the alchemical matrix, forming a pathway. In the ocean of collective subconsciousness, an infinitely large castle rises from the ocean of collective subconsciousness. Gently welcome the wanderers back home. In the requirement room, Dumbledore and Snape, sensing something, picked up their wands at the same time. The magic of Frank Longbottom and Alice Longbottom went riot together. All the equipment in the temporary medical room transformed by the room of requirement floated up. The floating devices began to spin as if they were caught in a tornado. Dumbledore and Snape waved their wands at the same time, and all the objects fell down and returned to their places. They pressed their wands against the Longbottoms' bodies, and powerful magic surged out of them, sealing the Longbottoms' magic tightly within their bodies. Different magical powers conflicted within the Longbottom couple's bodies, their blood vessels emerged, and some parts began to bleed due to excessive pressure. 2 healers, Dumbledore reminded. Severin and Elena, who were watching the show on the side, reacted quickly and took out potions from the medical box and applied them to the bleeding areas on the Longbottom couple's bodies. "The rest is up to them," Dumbledore murmured. On the island of consciousness, Aiden used himself as a channel to continuously draw in the power of the castle. During the thousands of years that he slept in the castle, Aiden did not accomplish nothing. He used his ability to weave a huge dream catcher in Hogwarts. This net can filter out the malice from the mental level for the students in Hogwarts to protect their minds from the intrusion of the deep world. This was originally a follow-up plan prepared by Salazar, but after he and the other 3 giants parted ways, it was Aiden and the remaining 3 who perfected and established the plan. Godric, Rowena, and Hagar traveled all over England, planting anchors in various places, and eventually took shape with Hogwarts as the core. Aiden named it the second project, the Mental Firewall. After connecting the net to the Longbottom's mental island, Aiden increased the output of the golden light ball. In the deep world, some guys who smelled the scent began to radiate their power upwards, but were all blocked by the net before approaching the Longbottom's island of consciousness. The silk thread slowly repaired the Longbottom couple's island of consciousness. After the last piece was pieced together, the silk thread exploded and turned into golden particles that scattered into the island. Stop looking, let's go. Aiden tapped Neville's forehead gently and pulled him back to reality. Inside the request-granting room, a group of people watched Aiden and Neville go from virtual to real, and finally slowly land on the ground. What happened? Dumbledore asked nervously. The repair is complete. All we need now is some time to recuperate and we'll be back to normal, Aiden replied. After hearing this, everyone's face showed joy. Teacher Si snorted and turned away. Send them back to St. Mungo's. I have woven dreams for them and cleared their memories. They must not mention those things after they wake up, and do not wake them up. Aiden gave 2 doctors instructions, asking them to take the person away. The next day, Aiden received many gifts from Neville's grandmother. If Hogwarts had not been closed when the school started, she would probably have come to visit. For breakfast, Aiden ate Hogwarts specialty fish and chips. Damn it, who invented this dish? Aiden gritted his teeth. Some wizard who loves fish. Edmund sat down, wearing his brand new prefect badge on his chest. Are you the prefect? Aiden raised his eyebrows. You didn't even notice that he was showing off the whole day yesterday. Oh, you went for a night cruise. Ethan suddenly remembered something in the middle of his words and changed his tone. After eating and drinking, Aiden was about to leave the hall, and then a group of little snakes came over, surrounding their new prefect. It's the long-lost brother. He has been silent for a long time since his father was expelled from the school board. Until now, he has become the prefect of Slytherin again, and he has once again set an example with the power to deduct points. First, he bumped into his beloved Harry at the door. I can't believe the Ministry of Magic would let you wander around, Draco scoffed. You. Harry was about to rush to the car, but was caught by Hermione and Ron. Be careful or I'll deduct points from you, Scarhead. Draco and the younger brothers behind him laughed. You'd better stay away from him, you're not the only prefect. Ron said. Well, you better behave yourself, Scarhead, because I'll be watching you like a hound. Draco pointed 2 fingers at his eyes, then at Harry. Chapter 277, Complex Schoolwork and Sentimental Lestrange. After dragging left, Hermione looked at Harry and told him what she had encountered. Harry, Lavender told me last night. Hermione told Harry what happened in her dormitory. Hey, you must have said a lot of bad things about me for the sake of dormitory harmony. Harry frowned. Harry, don't vent your parental emotions on your relatives and friends. Ron and I are on your side. Hermione scolded angrily, and Ron nodded. I'm sorry. Harry blamed himself. It's okay. Hermione said seriously. 2 hurried voices intertwined, but the friendship between the 3 was not affected. On the other side, the arrogant Draco continued his bullying behavior until he saw the back of a man wearing a wide wizard hat. Well, look who this is, the Rose of Ravenclaw. You're so welcome, but you still can't become the prefect. The sky cleared up and the rain stopped. Brother Zhige felt that he had woken up again and sent himself to a Sequence 3 audience member. Aiden raised his head and gave Draco a sweet smile. Then, the whole Hogwarts began to fall apart, and Draco and his brothers were taken into a completely real dream by Aiden. Can you say it again, prefect brother? An old dragon said cutely. Dragon, hey. I. Several people felt the powerful magic and were frightened to the point of being incoherent. So, may I ask this class leader brother, what should students who have done something wrong do? Long put his face close to Brother Jia. I'm sorry, please forgive me. He bowed his head, admitted his mistake, and apologized in one go. The sound of a finger snap echoed throughout the space, and the next moment Draco found himself back in Hogwarts. Draco and several others fell to the ground, huddled together, and the young wizards around them were pointing at him. As owls approached, the academic pressure in 5th grade became extremely heavy. The first day of school consisted of 2 charms classes and 2 magical biology classes. Professor Flitwick stood on a platform made of books and spent 15 minutes holding an owl's mobilization meeting for all the students. In this class, we will review the flying spell. Based on past experience, this spell should be a must-have on the exam this year. Professor Flitwick's attitude towards the spurring spell was that it was a must-test topic anyway, so 20 points were given for you to memorize it or not. After the charms class, Professor Flitwick assigned everyone a long essay, and every little wizard was exhausted. He even had little motivation to study magical biology in the 2nd class, which made Professor Grubbly Plank wonder if his teaching was not as good as Hagrid's. At noon, when Aiden went to the hall to eat with a book in his arms, he met 2 exhausted people and an energetic witch. What happened to them? Aiden asked. They are playing games on history of magic, and I decided to refuse to lend them my notes. Mother Hermione crossed her arms. No, it's actually the mitigating agent from potions class. We failed to prepare it, and Snape told us to drink it all. Ron replied weakly. Aiden reached out and placed his hand on Ron's shoulder, letting his magic seep into his body, checking him over. Well, a trace amount of toxins, and a sense of laziness. I guess you didn't heat up the crucible before adding the ingredients, and you didn't remove all the juice from the sunlight orchid. There was a hint of worry in Hermione's eyes when Aiden mentioned the poison. It's okay. They will recover in about an hour. Let them learn a lesson from this. Aiden blinked his right eye. Humph. Hermione snorted and walked straight into the hall. Well, goodbye. Aiden waved to his cousin and walked in. Wait, Aiden, save us. Ron's weak cry failed to win back his cousin's love. But he was hit hard by his 2 brothers. The twins appeared from behind them and hit each of them. The slap, which was intended as a greeting, directly knocked the 2 men down. Oh, it seems that Ronnie has been emptied out. George said, touching his chin. Is that the witch named Parvati? Fred raised his eyebrows at Ron. Aiden. Harry, who was lying on the ground and was so stunned by the poison that his reflexes were extremely long, cried for help. Oh, Aiden, no. The twins smiled at each other, left the 2 outside, and walked into the hall. Aiden's course selection in the afternoon actually made him feel a lot more relaxed. I took some time out to practice magic in the room of requirement, took a divination class, and dealt with Trelawney with an unfortunate future, and the whole afternoon passed. At dinner, the little wizards of Gryffindor seemed to be discussing Harry's deeds. Mr. Know-it-all, what's the situation over there? Aiden asked. Be respectful, I'm. Edmund also wanted to show off. But he immediately calmed down when Aiden placed his cold hand on his neck. They say Harry Potter might be crazy for openly talking back to Professor Umbridge in class and making wild claims about the Dark Lord's return, said Edmund. So, what does Master Lestrange think about this matter? Aiden deliberately changed the address. He's back, no doubt about it. According to Lestrange's news, the movements of dark wizards have been very abnormal recently. Although I don't know why that person didn't make a high-profile comeback. Edmund used the wrong moves but deduced the right results. Then why are you still staying here? Aren't you afraid that the woman in Azkaban will be released? Aiden said. My father recommended that I transfer to another school, and most of my family members have returned to Paris, but I smell a strange smell here, it's the eve of a storm. Edmund said with a frown. Lestrange has this ability. Aiden raised his eyebrows. Yes, because of a prophecy, each of my ancestors was able to keenly grasp the signs of change and participate in it. Rodolphus Lestrange, my cousin, although his ending was not good, he did gain power when you know who rose to power. Edmund said. So, you plan to join Voldemort? Aiden's words were somewhat meaningful. No, he won't be the winner, although this is just my intuition, said Edmund. Your father believed in you and stayed with you based on your intuition alone. Aiden was a little surprised. Lestrange is emotional, we don't usually act rationally. Edmund spread butter on the bread, took a bite, and continued. This sentimentality has caused us a lot of trouble, causing some family members to indulge in black magic and often kill each other. Sometimes I really feel that there may be some kind of destiny that allows us, Lestra, to survive to this day. Maybe. Aiden also picked up the steak and started eating. Chapter 278, Poor Defense Against the Dark Arts, Professor Pruitt. As expected, Harry was sentenced to a week of detention, and Umbridge used special dark magic products to physically punish Harry. Because he saw Dumbledore's dejected figure after being stripped of all his positions in the Wizengamot this year, Harry did not dare to go to Dumbledore. Harry, who had a conflict with Umbridge, was called to Professor McGonagall's office. Please take a seat, Mr. Potter, said Professor McGonagall. Harry sat in the chair nervously, waiting for Professor McGonagall's storm. Have some, Mr. Potter. Professor McGonagall picked up the cute ginger salamander cookies on the table. Professor, Harry was about to continue speaking when Professor McGonagall raised her hand to stop him. I already know the process. Professor McGonagall was silent for a while. You have to keep your head down, Harry, and try not to get into trouble and control your temper. Professor McGonagall called Harry by his name. Seeing Harry's sullen face, Professor McGonagall forced him to take another biscuit and then sent him away. After this, Harry's situation deteriorated again, and rumors about his paranoid attacks spread around the college. On Friday, it was finally Ravenclaw's turn to start their defense against the dark arts class. Good afternoon, kids. A pink toad from head to toe appeared at the gate. Ordinary wizarding levels, or OLS for short. If you study hard, you may get a good grade, but if you fail, the consequences are severe. Umbridge waved her wand, and the textbooks behind her floated towards the wizards. Your lessons have been trivial, and today you will have the honor of learning a proper, focused, ministry-approved defense against the dark arts course. Umbridge's strange accent echoed throughout the classroom, and Aiden simply used magic to seal his ears. Ethan raised his hand and Umbridge pointed her wand at him. Are we really not allowed to cast spells now as rumored before? Then what is the difference between us and muggles? Oh dear, that's not the case, you just need to use defensive magic safely and without risk. Of course, I have to reiterate that this is the Ministry's view, and you only need to master the theory to help you pass the exam. Umbridge smiled at Ethan, and the hairs on his body stood up. But the Dark Lord. Ethan wanted to say something. Enough. He's just an outdated clown talking nonsense. There is no such thing as a mysterious man in the world. Umbridge screamed loudly. Okay, let's start our class now. She turned around and smiled again. First, please read the preface of the textbook. Now I will select a student to recite it. Umbridge held up the Children's Illustrated Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook and began to look around the classroom. The little wizards, fearing embarrassment, lowered their heads. Well, let me see. Let Mr. Pruitt come up and recite. Aiden Imperial Pruitt. Umbridge's eyes were fixed on a paddling dragon. Unfortunately, Long was focused on his own world at the moment. After all, he completed the second phase of the project independently, and there were still many places that needed debugging. Well, it seems our Mr. Pruitt is very shy. Umbridge walked up to Aiden and snatched his book away. This action caused Aiden to connect the wrong spiritual line, making his week's efforts go to waste. Now, may I rise and recite this preface, Mr. Pruitt? Umbridge ripped his book in half right in front of Aiden. Long frowned and exhaled the foul air in his lungs. With a ripping sound, the rope on Aiden's right hand exploded, and a dragon claw emerged from the shadow of the torn clothes. The claws created a gust of wind and hit Umbridge's toad cheeks hard. The Sequence 3 dragon path beyonder displayed his great power to the fullest. Umbridge flew towards the wall as if she was hit by a speeding train. After smashing 2 stone walls in succession, she fell into the ruins and died. Aiden, you killed her! Edmund exclaimed. No, I controlled the strength, I think. Aiden raised his right hand, and a virtual clock appeared, and everything returned to normal as if in reverse. After mastering the hour reversal spell and some of the core fragments of anti-entropy, Aiden can also interfere with time and space to a certain extent. What he is using now is one of his research results. Umbridge stood before him intact, and Aiden snapped his fingers, knocking her unconscious. Okay, let's just pretend that what happened today never happened, okay? Aiden walked up to the podium, exuding the aura of a veteran teacher. The little eagles and badgers below nodded repeatedly. After all, the 2 walls that had just been broken had just been repaired. For this class, go to the correct textbook. Aiden raised his right hand and his textbook flew into his hand, flames ignited out of nowhere and burned to ashes. Now, it's Mr. Pruitt's teaching time, raise your wands, said Aiden. At the same time, a long staff appeared in his hand. He tapped the ground lightly, and the classroom was widened dozens of times. Yet, the little wizards in the audience cheered. Listen carefully. For the theoretical exam, I hope the Ravenclaw students can help the Hufflepuff students as much as possible. I will send you the assistance arrangements later. If a little badger gets left behind, you have to be careful because we all live under the same roof. Aiden gave the little eagles a little threat, making them swallow their saliva together. And now, as our first defense against the dark arts class in 5th grade, I need to make sure that each of you can use the shield charm proficiently. Aiden raised his staff and wrote letters in the air. The spell is Protego, repeat it after me. Aiden said. Protego. Very good, you must remember that when you release this magic, you must have a strong desire to protect yourself. I suggest that you try to recall how you felt when you fell down the stairs. If you have not had this experience, I suggest you try it after class. Aiden's lectures were humorous and interesting, and the class ended quickly. Wow, I didn't know Professor Pruitt had such teaching ability. Edmund came up and teased. You have sufficient information. Please help me make a support form. Aiden suddenly turned into an unscrupulous boss and began to exploit Edmund. Edmund raised the corners of his mouth and rubbed 2 fingers together. Teach you how to communicate with the patroness spell. Aiden held his forehead with his hand. Deal. Edmund took the bait. Suddenly I felt like I had seen this scene somewhere before. Aiden thought as he walked towards the Ravenclaw Tower. Chapter 279, True New Professor, Trick Shop Operation Week 2. Another weekend ended, and Edmund handed the list to Aiden, while Aiden also handed him his own patroness research notes. Then I look forward to Professor Pruitt's great performance. Edmund raised his notebook and waved it. In the Transfiguration class on Monday, Professor McGonagall once again explained the magic of the vanishing charm to all the students. And have all the little wizards practice sending the mice away. After class, Aiden picked up his books and prepared to leave, but Professor McGonagall stopped him. Mr. Pruitt, would you please come here for a moment? Of course, Professor. Aiden nodded. In the office, Professor McGonagall poured Aiden a cup of black tea and brought him a plate of ginger salamander cookies. But this thing tastes bad. As for why Aiden knows this, a dream weaver learned it from a dream. Quietly pushing some of the cookies aside, Aiden asked, Professor, is there something you want to talk to me about? Well, I heard that you did quite well in your 5th year defense against the dark arts class. Professor McGonagall rubbed her hands. Well, yes, Professor Umbridge is a conscientious good professor. Aiden narrowed his eyes. Oh, then Mr. Pruitt, I hope this kind of goodness can spread to other grades. Professor McGonagall said meaningfully. Aiden, excuse me. Seriously? Aiden tilted his head. Yes. Dean Mau Mau nodded. But this will be discovered, Aiden said shyly. Are you kidding me? The vice principal questioned. If you agree, all the teachers will turn a blind eye to you if you don't show up in other classes in the future, said Professor McGonagall. Deal. Long took the bait. Humph, the deputy principal narrowed his eyes. Oh no, I got fooled. So in the following period of time, everyone felt that Umbridge's teaching level had improved by leaps and bounds. A certain dragon with heterochromatic eyes smiled slightly, hiding his merits and fame. The Gemini Joke Shop opened on Tuesday and they are selling their products through the mail at schools. At the same time, they secretly published the news in the Daily Prophet without telling Mrs. Molly. Fortunately, because of Harry's matter, Molly unsubscribed from the Daily Prophet, otherwise they would have been flooded with yelling letters for a few days. Aiden, our beautiful little brother, would you like a piece of quick-acting skipping candy? George put his arm around Aiden's shoulders, just like he did when they were little. It's only 1 sickle per pill and it can help you escape from boring classes. Fred put his arm around Aiden's other shoulder and promoted it. Give me 3. Aiden took out 3 sickles and handed them to them. The boss is generous. George took out candy from the box. Aiden laid down the drugged parts and stuffed them all into his mouth. Wait, that's not how you eat it. Fred was so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest when he saw this scene. A northeast arrow burp southeast arrow dot. Aiden burped and commented, it tastes pretty good. My god, you ate enough to bring down an adult fire dragon, and nothing happened. George was stunned. You see, it doesn't work for me. Aiden spread his hands, intending to use this as a warning to them not to try to sell him products again. Unexpectedly, this aroused the interest of the 2 people. Try this, fat tongue toffee. Fred took out a candy from the second layer of the small drawer. Aiden ate it, but still no effect. Here's canary candy. George also took out the candy. Acid bubble gum, constipation kernels, exploding magic wand candy. Hoo-hoo, the 2 men sat on the ground panting, with Aiden, who was fine, standing next to them. How did you do that? George asked. Not to mention your ongoing attempts to kill shareholders. After I completed the transformation of magical creatures, my magic system is different from yours. Conventional medicine and magic may not be able to work on me anymore. Aiden explained. Can I? Fred gave a squinting smile. No way. Aiden crossed his arms. Gryffindor and Ravenclaw had their afternoon herbology class together, and Aiden rushed to the shed as usual. On the way, Aiden saw Harry and Luna standing together. I walked over quietly and saw two people talking. Hello, Harry Potter. Luna knew who was coming without turning around. Aren't your feet cold? Harry asked. A little bit, my shoes like to play hide and seek with me, but they will appear on their own, said Luna. Luna's shoes are flying over. A clear young voice came. A pair of shoes flew out of the castle and landed in front of Luna. Look. Luna smiled at Harry. Aiden. Harry turned around, and the thestral beside him nudged him. What is this? Harry fell to the ground in shock. Thestrals, only those who have witnessed death can see them, Aiden said. But I didn't, Harry tried to argue. Of course you do, your mother. Aiden lowered his tone. Oh. Harry lowered his head. There's no need to be so depressed. Meeting death is a compulsory course for each of us. Luna stepped forward and pulled Harry up. My mother died due to magic experiments when I was a child, but fortunately, I still have my father. Luna's words were a little confusing. But Aiden could tell that she was reminding Harry to keep his focus on his living friends and family. Anyway, we all know that the mysterious man is back, and we believe you. Luna made a fist gesture to Harry, then put on her shoes and left quickly. Let's go, it's time to go to the herbology class. That girl is much stronger than you. Aiden patted Harry's shoulder. In the herbology class, Professor Sprout also talked for a long time about the importance of owls. At the same time, she also asked everyone to fertilize the herbs. After the class, everyone was covered in the smell of dragon dung, and also received a paper assignment. Aiden, who was smelling bad, hurried back to the Ravenclaw bathroom to clean up. By the time he went to have dinner, it was already a little late. Ron walked out of the restaurant excitedly, and when he met Aiden he actually gave him a bright smile. What good thing happened? Aiden asked. I'm going to try out for the Quidditch goalkeeper this Saturday. I've just submitted my application to Angelina, and she has agreed. Ron raised his eyebrows proudly. Wait, with such a busy schedule these days, do you still have time to practice Quidditch? Aiden asked curiously. Humph, don't underestimate me. I can still study during normal time and practice in the middle of the night. Ron patted his chest. Then I wish you success. Aiden offered his blessing. It's so rare that you would bless me. Ron was a little surprised. No, what image do I usually have in your eyes? Aiden tilted his head and quietly released his mental power to guide him. The silver-haired devil, the homework Superman, the Snitch King. Ron really started counting in front of Aiden. Chapter 280, Revealed, Failed, Investigator. Harry, who came back from the detention room, ran into Ron who had sneaked out to practice. Oh, Harry, what's wrong with your hand? The sharp-eyed Ron noticed Harry's trembling right hand. Nothing. Harry hid his right hand. Ron stepped forward and grabbed Harry's hand. Due to a week of confinement, Harry's hand was repeatedly scratched, and finally formed an ugly scar. She's punishing you, you must tell Professor McGonagall or Dumbledore, Ron exclaimed. No, let's not cause them any more trouble. Harry lowered his head. No, I'm going to tell Aiden. Ron broke the necklace around his neck. A small silver dragon patronus flew out of the necklace. What's wrong so late? I don't feel like you're in danger. Aiden's voice came from Xiaolong. Umbridge punished Harry by making him write a confession using dark magic items. Ron complained. Oh, by the way, I would have forgotten about this if you hadn't mentioned it. The little silver dragon knocked his head. Then, Umbridge, who was resting in the Defense Against the Dark Arts office, suddenly fell into a nightmare. She stood up with a frown, took out a piece of parchment, picked up the pen she had used to punish Harry and began to write. I, Professor Umbridge of Defense Against the Dark Arts, now consider that Harry Potter's punishment has been sufficient, and hereby declare. Then Umbridge waved her wand, and the sheepskin flew and stuck to the door of the Hogwarts Hall. Well, starting tomorrow you won't have to go to Umbridge for detention, heir. The little silver dragon yawned, then flew into Ron's necklace, and the necklace repaired itself automatically. That's it. Harry looked at Ron. It should have been resolved. Aiden is still very reliable. Ron didn't know how to respond. By the way, where are you going dressed like this? Harry asked as he looked at Ron, who was in front of him with his protective gear and broom. Go practice Quidditch. I applied for Angelina's goalkeeper recruitment. Ron shared this with Harry for a while. Really? Then I wish you pass in advance. Harry was happy for Ron. Just wait. Ron patted his chest. The next day, news that Harry had been released from detention by Umbridge spread throughout the castle. What? How can you just let him go so easily? A platinum-haired boy in the crowd complained. The students talked a lot, but it did not change Umbridge's decision. She didn't even know that she had let Harry Potter go. The pink toad excitedly went to the hall to eat and saw his own blood letter. What? Umbridge's eyes widened. I didn't write this, it's invalid. Umbridge yelled. But the blood and magic on it can't be faked. Professor McGonagall came out and retorted. I think as professors we should have the right. Umbridge was interrupted by Professor McGonagall just as she was about to speak. I also think that as professors, we should have some credibility, instead of holding on to authority and going back on our words like old-fashioned antiques, Professor McGonagall said seriously. I'm sorry, Professor, it seems like you're trying to hint at something. Umbridge raised her voice. I just hope that as a professor, you can better abide by the standards of our school. Professor McGonagall was not to be outdone. It seems that you are questioning the way I deal with people, Minerva. Umbridge walked up 2 steps so that she could look down at Professor McGonagall. No offense, Dolores, I just hope you can change your outdated thinking. The deputy headmaster, who noticed her little action, also took 2 steps forward, using his height to suppress Umbridge. Offstage, Aiden frowned, wondering why Umbridge would break free from her hypnosis. I'm sorry, dear, but to question my teaching is to question the Ministry of Magic, and by extension, you are questioning the Minister of Magic himself. Umbridge said in a forceful manner. I am a tolerant person, but the only thing I cannot tolerate is disloyalty. Umbridge turned and looked at the little wizard. Disloyalty. Professor McGonagall sensed something and took 2 steps back. The wave of the collective subconscious ocean raised by the wizard's recognition of the Ministry of Magic rushed towards her. But a castle appeared in the sea of collective unconsciousness, blocking the waves. At the same time, a net protected Professor McGonagall's island of consciousness. Professor McGonagall calmed down and glanced at Aiden. Aiden shook his head at her, indicating that his control over Umbridge had failed. Since the situation at Hogwarts has deteriorated to this point, I have been appointed by Minister Cornelius as the senior investigator of Hogwarts. The decree signed by Fudge once again made Umbridge an official of the Ministry of Magic, and the trust that the wizards placed in the ministry turned into protection surrounding her. Umbridge raised her head triumphantly and glanced at the wizards below, as if she had already seen them trembling under her command. Pure power, pure evil. Aiden murmured as he looked at Umbridge on the stage. What did you say? Asked Edmund. Nothing. Have you read the information I sent you? Aiden asked back. I've seen it. Fudge will definitely step down this time. By the way, the election of the Ministry of Magic is so weird. Why does it have to be held every 8 years? Edmund complained. Although 7 is a magical number, 8 represents infinity and symbolizes the good wishes given to us by wizards of the past. A gentle smile appeared on Aiden's delicate face. This made everyone around who was looking at Aiden fall into dementia. What happened next was largely within Aiden's expectations. Fudge immediately signed Decree 23, officially appointing Umbridge as the senior investigator of Hogwarts. At the same time, the news was widely spread through the influence of the conservatives in the Daily Prophet. After the reforms to Defense Against the Dark Arts, Umbridge will have the power to rectify the declining quality of teaching at Hogwarts. Fudge's voice was imprinted on the photographic stone and sent to all parts of England through the Lestrange family. As a result, the Lestrange family gained the favour of the Conservatives in the Ministry of Magic and were given the green light in all business channels. However, they did not realise that the shadow of a dragon was mixed in and was being transported to various places. Umbridge was very proud of herself for gaining power from Hogwarts. She began to patrol Hogwarts with her clipboard. At the same time, she used her power to issue several restraining orders against Hogwarts. It seems as if the freedom of all students is stifled in the regulations. Thursday, Potions class, a pink toad surrounds Professor Snape. One of the few times in his life that he felt helpless, St. Petersburg actually looked to Aiden for help. At this moment, Aiden was already imitating the thoughts of the St. Petersburg cult. Umbridge, will you be my son? Stowe asked affectionately. Oh, Severus, I do, said the pink toad. Then please keep 6 miles away from me, the teacher sneered. 5 points will be deducted from Ravenclaw for daydreaming in class. The knock from the teacher brought Aiden back to reality. Chapter 281, Prophecy, Earth Vein Manager, and another detention. For a whole week, Umbridge caused chaos throughout Hogwarts. There were more and more prohibitions on the wall, including no Weasley merchandise, no music, no laughter. At the same time, Umbridge went deep into every professor's classroom. And from time to time he would show off his authority by interrupting the professor in class and interviewing students. Professor Flitwick seemed to have achieved good results, but when Aiden looked at him, the light in his eyes was gone. Great! Aiden quietly gave him a thumbs up from the audience. The recent days of turmoil have caused resentment among the students in Hogwarts. Even the Slytherins, who have always been supportive of power, are dissatisfied with Umbridge's constant presence. And when night falls, a beautiful dragon sits on top of the clouds in the dream, carefully weaving a protective net. And in the ocean of collective subconsciousness, the tide accumulated due to the dissatisfaction of the young wizards was lightly let go by him, and it surged towards a professor's office in Hogwarts. On Thursday, in divination class, Umbridge was still sitting on Trelawney's cushion, holding her scoreboard. Trelawney was very impatient with this unexpected intruder, but remembering Professor McGonagall's instructions, she endured it. Come on, children, report to me the dreams you have collected recently. Trelawney said to the little wizards. The dragon sitting in the corner spread out his hands, with silver-white silk threads hanging from his hands. The silk thread supports a small net, and crystal-clear water droplets sparkle on the net. If someone looks closely, they will find that these are not water droplets at all, but sparkling dreams. When Trelawney was about to call Aiden, he was still struggling with whether to hand it in. However, Umbridge rescued Aiden in time. Professor Trelawney, can you make a prophecy for me? Umbridge interrupted the class. Finally, Trelawney's anger was aroused, and she raised her shaking hands. A vast force took possession of Trelawney's tongue. Aiden felt the fluctuation of attributes, and when he turned around, an old friend appeared. Why are you here? Aiden raised his eyebrows. The old man said I should take his job, Oliver replied. I didn't expect that after such a long absence, the teaching environment here has become so polluted. You just watch this insect wreaking havoc on your territory. Oliver looked at Umbridge with disgust and teased Aiden at the same time. By lifting her up this time, Fudge has completely integrated himself with the conservative forces. She will be the first stone to fall from the building. The dragon sat on the dais, declaring Umbridge's fate. Professor Trelawney also spoke with him, and Oliver took out the crystal ball and pointed it at Trelawney. The fantasy dragon has woven a big net for everyone. The storm of war is about to hit, and your road ahead is only endless darkness. It seemed as if there were thousands of people crowded in Professor Trelawney's throat. The voices of men, women, children, and the elderly mixed together, sounding extremely strange. Lovely. Umbridge smiled and then put a cross on the clipboard. What did I just say? Trelawney looked confused. Oliver stuffed a fluorescent crystal ball into his arms. Take care of yourself, brother. I have a feeling it won't be peaceful down there. Aiden warned him. Aren't you the source of the greatest unrest, the dream dragon that weaves the great web? Oliver gave Aiden a hug and then disappeared into the air. The source of the unrest. Aiden looked out the window and smiled. On Friday afternoon, Umbridge used her investigator authority to fire Trelawney. She packed up all of Trelawney's belongings and dropped them at the door. In the cold wind, both of them were wrapped in thick clothes, but Professor Trelawney looked a little bleak. I've been teaching here for 16 years. Hogwarts is my home. Trelawney's voice choked with sobs. You can't do this, she begged. In fact, I can. Umbridge held up the appointment letter in her hand. Professor McGonagall pushed aside the students blocking her way and ran to the middle, holding Trelawney in her arms. Do you have anything to say? Umbridge challenged. Oh, of course, I have a lot more to say. Professor McGonagall glared at her fiercely. Click. The door of Hogwarts opened behind them. The dragon and the phoenix came out, and their huge magic power spread wildly, causing some students to stay away from them. Minerva, send Sybil back, said Dumbledore. Professor McGonagall nodded and helped Trelawney inside. Thank you. Trelawney grabbed Dumbledore's clothes as she passed by him. Dumbledore, need I remind you that according to Order 23 signed by the Minister, Umbridge was ready to show off. You have the power to fire my teacher, but... Dumbledore interrupted Umbridge, then stepped aside to make way for Aiden behind him. According to the ancient contract, I am the manager of the ley lines of this land. As Aiden spoke, he raised his hand, and the entire Hogwarts castle lit up with fluorescence, which gathered into a piece of parchment. Spreading out the parchment, Aiden's name was clearly written on it. Liar, fake, this land belongs to the Ministry of Magic, what right do you have? Oppression, Aiden began. The magic power of the surrounding earth veins directly pressed Umbridge to the ground, and a shallow pit was smashed into the stone floor, and the cracks continued to expand. Even the most unlearned wizard can feel that this world is rejecting him. Let her go, she is from the Ministry of Magic after all. Dumbledore said. Humph. Aiden snorted coldly, and the pressure disappeared. Umbridge stood up from the ground, her face covered in dust. According to the contract that our family ancestor made with the castle owner, Salazar Slytherin, thousands of years ago, I, as the ley line manager, allow Lady Sybil Trelawney to live here. After saying that, Aiden turned and left, and Dumbledore also walked into the castle. Harry wanted to catch up with the two men, but was blocked by the little wizards who were scattered like birds and beasts. Umbridge stood there, trying her best to maintain her false smile, while the bulging part of her face was still twitching. The teaching at Hogwarts continued, and in subsequent courses, all professors began to involuntarily avoid practical courses and turn to theoretical teaching. However, because of the protection from the Ministry of Magic on Umbridge, Aiden was unable to completely control her, and the quality of the course returned to what it was before. In order to deal with Umbridge's provocation, Hermione even memorized the entire book, but Umbridge still deducted 10 points from her for speaking too loudly. This behavior made Harry so angry that he yelled at Umbridge on the spot, and he was punished with writing in blood and being detained again. Chapter 282. Fire, Celebration, and Newspaper Publishing. In the corridor on the 8th floor, a hunched figure followed Aiden. Argus, I have an order for you. Aiden walked to the windowsill and stopped. Yes, sir. Filch nodded respectfully. I want you to work for Umbridge and monitor the school for her. If something unfortunate happens to me, I hope you can protect the little wizards in the school to the best of your ability. Also, don't reveal the fact that you can do magic in front of her. Aiden looked out the window at the scenery. The gloomy clouds seemed to bury Hogwarts. No, sir, how could a wizard with such powerful magic like you? Filch immediately became anxious when he heard this. No, I need to be fully prepared. Even if I'm gone, I can still spread the flame of magic to the whole world. Aiden took out a book and handed it to Filch, which recorded how to use the remains of the Deep King and the key to connect to the mind server. Memorize the key to the last one, remember it firmly, and then burn it, Aiden said. Filch tore off the last page of the book, imprinted the words on it word by word into his mind, and then burned the paper in front of Aiden. Now, execute the order. After saying that, Aiden's figure slowly dissipated into the air. Filch bowed in the direction where Aiden disappeared, then walked towards the Defense Against the Dark Arts office with firm steps. Aiden went to the kitchen with Filch's back to the road. Ron was fortunate enough to be selected into the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and George and Fred suggested holding a small celebration party. By the way, the invitation letter was sent to Aiden. Don't you think it's strange to have a Ravenclaw among a group of Gryffindors? Aiden asked while grabbing a chicken drumstick at the long table in the kitchen. There are Slytherins and Hufflepuffs over there. There aren't so many rules in the kitchen. Those who can find their way here are all like-minded people. Cedric put his arm around Aiden's shoulders. Ever since Aiden changed his fate, Cedric and Aiden's relationship had inexplicably improved a lot. At the same time, this year, he was successfully elected as the president of the Boys' Union, which made his father show off for a while. Why hasn't Harry come yet? Aiden turned and asked Ron. He's got detention with Umbridge. He'll be here in a minute, said Ron. After a while, the kitchen door was pushed open again and Harry walked in. Am I late? Harry asked. No, you're the only one missing, Ron greeted. Harry took his seat and the twins raised their glasses and smiled. Congratulations Ronnie on making it to the Quidditch team. Cheers. Cheers. Harry's hand holding the cup suddenly trembled, and Hermione, who was knitting, immediately noticed Harry's unnaturalness. She reached out and grabbed Harry, turning his hand up. On the back of his hand, lines of irreversible scars formed a line of words, "I am a liar." "What's going on?" Hermione was heartbroken to see her eldest son being treated like this. "It's Umbridge. Her way of giving detention is to punish the little wizards with dark magic items," Ron explained. "You knew this and didn't tell me." Hermione yelled at Ron. "But what's the point of telling you?" Ron was puzzled. The two old couples began to quarrel, and Harry was caught in the middle, feeling torn. "Okay, I'll heal you." Aiden grabbed Harry's hand. He took out a bottle of potion from his left pocket, pulled out the cork, poured a little, and applied it evenly on Harry's wound. After a while, the scars on his hands quickly scabbed over and fell off, revealing smooth skin. "What is this?" Harry asked. "Pwet. No, it's now called Raven Alchemy Workshop's new product, the Scar Remover." Aiden prepared in advance for the confrontation with the Ministry of Magic, split up the business of Pruitt Alchemy Workshop, and quietly completed the reorganization. Now the Pwet Alchemy Shop has gone bankrupt, and underneath it, a behemoth called the Raven Alchemy Shop has quietly swallowed up the market vacated by Pwet. Okay, look, Harry's hand is healed." Ron, whose soft waist was grabbed by Hermione, begged for mercy hurriedly. As everyone was chatting, a Slytherin student behind them turned on the radio. Fudge's voice came from inside, echoing throughout the kitchen. "We have had some unpleasant disappearances lately, but there is evidence that they were caused by the missing murderer Peter Pettigrew. Fudge, that fat bastard, and Umbridge, that evil old witch." Hermione cursed. "Harry." Serious voice suddenly came from Harry's pocket. Aiden cooperated and tapped the table, and a silent spell enveloped the few people. "Sirius, what are you doing here?" Harry took out the mirror from his pocket. It was obviously a two-sided mirror. "In reply to your letter, you told me that the scar on your forehead hurts when you come in contact with Umbridge?" Sirius asked. "Yeah, I think Voldemort might be possessed by her, just like Quirrell did," said Harry. "Probably not. I don't sense any sense of chaos from Umbridge," Aiden said meaningfully. "Aiden is right, she should be just a pure villain, so what else did she do, train you to kill half-blood creatures?" Sirius teased. "No, she won't even let us use magic," Hermione complained. "That's normal. Fudge is afraid that Dumbledore will raise an army," Sirius explained. "In short, because of Fudge, the Order of the Phoenix is greatly constrained. I'm sorry that we can't help you. Please be careful." It seemed that someone else was following Sirius, and the two-way mirror was disconnected. "If Umbridge refuses to teach us, we need to spread the methods of defense," Hermione suggested. "Besides, you need your own mouthpiece to spread the news." Aiden winked at Hermione. "What do you mean?" Hermione didn't respond. "House Elf Rights Association," Aiden reminded. "You mean to say that we should publish a newspaper in the name of the House Elf Rights Promotion Association?" Hermione grasped the key point. "Yes, who would care about the Rights Promotion Association with a very low sense of presence? After all, wizards are used to being arrogant, aren't they?" Aiden turned around and winked at Dobby. Dobby smiled at Aiden and served him coconut sorbet. "Let's start the newspaper first, and use the Ministry of Magic's advantage of a few correct statements to expand its influence. The content of subsequent propaganda will not be controlled by the Ministry of Magic," Aiden explained. "Good idea." Hermione nodded, fire in her eyes, but Harry and Ron swallowed quietly. Chapter 283. Business Expansion and the Formation of a Secret Society. The next 2 weeks went smoothly for everyone and Harry's detention was over. Ron's Quidditch skills improved steadily, and Hermione's vanishing charm was gradually able to target large objects. Within 2 weeks, Aiden successfully completed the laying of the British area of the second project and began to expand its business to Egypt. At Hermione's suggestion, Harry gathered a group of people who were willing to believe in him and prepared to form a secret society. Aiden received information from Egypt saying that they would send someone to discuss relevant matters. On the weekend, the 4 of them went to the Hog's Head pub in Hogsmeade together. There are many idlers in the Pig's Head bar who don't look like good people at first glance. Aiden walked over and saw a strange man wrapped in bandages fainting for no apparent reason. Albus Ford glanced at him and used a spell to throw the bandaged man away. Harry and his friends discussed forming a society. Aiden unexpectedly ran into a few acquaintances. "Amir." Aiden recognized the man. Long time no see, Mr. Pruitt. It's not just me who's here today, there are also 2 acquaintances. Amir moved aside, revealing 2 figures. Mr. Priest, long time no see. No, I should call you Mr. Wizard. The grown-up Nura smiled at Aiden with a hint of exotic charm. Nura, why are you so polite to him? The boy next to her said sourly. Amin. Nura tapped his head gently. So, what's going on? Aiden looked at Amir. In fact, after we took them both in, we discovered special talents in them. They both have a special adaptability to the Golden Sutra. Oh, it should be called the Silent Tablet. Amir explained. Does your silent slate need to be adapted? Aiden wondered. Don't you want yours too? Amir was a little confused. Then, a flame appeared out of nowhere and burned Amir. Amir. I'm sorry, I'm not a silent person. Aiden understood a little. I don't blame you. I didn't expect that you would find another Dumbledore-like character. You British wizards are really unique. Amir held his forehead helplessly. The mission of these 2 children is to come here and complete the connection with you. I'm sorry I can't reveal the rest. Amir smiled. Then please take care of me from now on, Mr. Wizard. Nura bowed slightly. Humph. Amin originally wanted to act cool, but Nura pressed his head and made him salute as well. Then I'll leave the person to you and I'll go back first. Amor stood up immediately. Wait. Aiden wanted to keep him, but he disappeared in the bar in a flash. 3 people were left, looking at each other. Come on, follow me first. Dumbledore and I will find a place to settle you down later. Aiden waved his hand, cast psychological invisibility on the 2 of them, and walked up to the box on the 2nd floor. In the private room, people's questioning voices were heard, and Harry lowered his head nervously. Aiden walked up behind him and put his hands on his shoulders. Go ahead and say whatever you want to say. Aiden encouraged Harry. Harry pursed his lips and stood up quickly. Let me tell you why. Even if what I said is all false, can you be sure that you will never encounter a dark wizard in your life? Harry's questioning voice echoed in the room, instantly drowning out all other voices. But the Ministry of Magic said we are safe. A Ravenclaw student raised his hand. Really? Aiden asked, and a levitation spell lifted him up. AI. Aiden. The student obviously recognized the Ravenclaw celebrity. Now tell me, Michael Corner, what are you going to do if I'm the bad guy and you're caught by me, using what you learned from Umbridge's book against me? Aiden hooked his finger, and a rattan chair automatically grew out of the wooden board on the ground. The dragon sat on the throne. Although he was shorter than everyone else, everyone inexplicably felt like they were being looked down upon. Call the Aurors to warn you that this behavior is illegal. Michael Corner's tone was very weak. Okay, answer, if it's in class, I don't mind giving you extra 10 points. But guess how many times I could kill you, or how many times you would have to be tortured, from the time you called for help until the Aurors arrived. Aiden narrowed his eyes. A huge sense of oppression spread out, and everyone felt as if they were being stared at by a giant dragon. Snap! Aiden snapped his fingers, and Jean Raymond was slowly put down, and the powerful momentum disappeared without a trace. Aiden winked at Harry and then walked up behind him. So, we can't rely on the ridiculous regulations of the Ministry of Magic. We need the ability to protect our own lives quickly and in a timely manner. Harry stood up. Everyone was convinced, and Hermione took out the contract in due time, and they lined up to sign their names on it. Well, I have to tell you that the parchment is enchanted. If anyone reveals our affairs, the word traitor will be engraved on his face. Hermione finally came out to play the bad guy and made vicious threats. After the meeting, Harry and others returned to Hogwarts through the Long Bridge, and this scene happened to be discovered by Umbridge. Aiden, who had parted with them early, took Amin and Nura to find Dumbledore. So, this is your illegitimate child in Egypt? Dumbledore teased Aiden. Did you eat too much sugar and your brain got fogged up? Aiden rolled his eyes. Don't tell me you didn't receive any news. Aiden asked. What happened? Dumbledore asked. Tisk, tisk, I can't believe you actually locked yourself up in the castle and did nothing. Aiden said in amazement. At the same time, he raised his hand, isolating Nura and Amin's perception. I am old, and I am completely disappointed in Cornelius for what he did, but I am very afraid that I will be sent to the gallows of power. Dumbledore shuddered at the thought of that scene. Why not give it to the youngster? Aiden gently put his fingers together. Who? Amelia Bones. Aiden said a name. I heard that you had a close relationship with her, and Cornelius even targeted her because of it. Dumbledore said meaningfully. But it cannot be denied that she is a competent person. Moreover, she is not loyal to anyone. She is only loyal to the law. Aiden turned his gaze to Dumbledore. Let's wait and see for a while. Dumbledore nodded. By the way, what do these two children do? Dumbledore pointed at Ammon and Nura, who looked resentful. Aiden hurriedly unshielded both of them. They were sent by the Egyptian side to negotiate the project. After all, everyone has a responsibility to fight against the King of the Deep. Aiden gave a mercenary smile. So why did you bring them here? Dumbledore was not fooled by Aiden. I'd like to ask you to find a place for them to stay. Aiden lowered his head embarrassedly. Chapter 284. Restraining Order, Venue Determination. Although Aiden hypnotized the bandaged weirdo Willie Wilderson in the Hogshead Bar, he was unable to stop Harry and his men from gathering there frequently. Umbridge used Willie Wilderson's crime as a pretext to ask him to monitor Harry's every move outside the school. Umbridge learned that Harry Potter and his friends were going to form a secret society. So Umbridge signed and issued Education Order No. 24 in advance, disbanding all student groups and gatherings and prohibiting the establishment of any organization or club without permission. This move put the Quidditch work of the four houses in jeopardy. Gryffindor was the special target of the whole activity. The captains of the other three teams were restored as soon as they applied, but Angelina was the only one who was stuck when she applied. In the History of Magic class, I suddenly felt something, turned around, and found Hedwig flying in, covered in wounds. Harry reached out to catch Hedwig, hurriedly ate a quick-acting candy to skip class, and slipped out of the classroom. He took Hedwig all the way to Professor Grubbly Plank for treatment, and at the same time he knew that Sirius had invited Harry to meet him by the fire tonight. Harry was very curious why Sirius didn't continue to contact him through the two-way mirror. At night, the trio gathered in front of the fire, and a familiar face emerged from the flames. Harry, I heard that you set up the defense against the dark arts class. Congratulations, and well done. Sirius was about to praise when he was pushed away by a hand. Oh, it's so good to see you, Harry. Madame Molly's face emerged from the fire, and Harry knew why Sirius was reluctant to use the two-way mirror. Mom! Ron screamed, attracting Molly's attention in the flames. Ron Weasley, I won't allow you to join any secret group. Mrs. Molly's roar came from the flames. Oh, and of course Harry and Hermione, I also suggest that you don't participate in these things, so as to save yourself from trouble. Mrs. Molly had a different attitude towards Harry and Hermione. By the way, Sirius was about to speak. A fat, stubby hand with an ugly old-fashioned ring stretched out from the furnace and crushed the figure in the flames. Sirius, who was far away at the Black Mansion, pulled his head out in time and was not injured by the exploding fire. Ha! Ron, Harry, and Hermione took a step back in fear. It's Umbridge. Harry judged the owner of the attack. She's monitoring communications throughout Hogwarts. Hermione also recognized the type of magic. It seems that we won't be able to contact the outside world for a short time. Harry concluded. Ron, who was standing beside him, smiled. In the Ravenclaw dormitory, Aiden cast a traceless extension spell, and Ammon and Nura lived here. Aiden had to take time out every night to teach them the operation and maintenance of the mental firewall. Ethan and Edmund would sneak in every night to eavesdrop on Aiden's lectures, but the two were not compatible, so Aiden let them listen to the lectures. But teaching in the dormitory was really limited, so Aiden set out to go to a place he hadn't been to for a long time. The next day, in Professor Flitwick's office, Aiden sat on his pile of books and drank tea. Aiden, you haven't come to see me for a long time. Now you suddenly appear, do you bring any new spells? Professor Flitwick looked expectant. Professor, has the Dueling Association been disbanded? Aiden asked. Yes, when that old witch arrived, she forced me to disband the Duel Association. Professor Flitwick pumped his fist and gnashed his teeth at the air. Well, let me modify the rules of the Duel Association. I happen to have a project recently that may be able to be integrated into it. The dragon sitting on the pile of books smiled, and the shadow behind him covered the earth. So, in the office, the two of them started to modify the contract of the Unbreakable Curse and directly disbanded the Absolute Psychic Blade Association. At the same time, Aiden once again brought Professor Flitwick to the Twilight Zone. This time, the system's help was no longer needed. Aiden, who had already reached Sequence 3, constructed a dream in the hazy illusion as a stabilizing anchor. "Oh, old man, your substitute is the most useless." Aiden touched the gem on his neck. "Haha," the system spat at him. "Connect the passage of the spiritual firewall to the misty fantasy world, and through the technology of ancient wizards, extend the passage to various countries. At the same time, by making use of the transmission properties of the hazy illusion, every wizard in each country can freely weave a protective net to cover themselves." After looking at his own creation and indulging himself for a while, Aiden left the hazy fantasy. "How is it? Was it successful?" Professor Flitwick looked at Aiden with anticipation. "Of course." Aiden gave a thumbs up. After handing over some tips on weaving to Professor Flitwick, Aiden left his office. In the afternoon, Aiden hurried to the dormitory with a book in his arms. Amin and Nura did not stay long, after all, they were smuggled in. Therefore, Aiden's teaching schedule is tight and the workload is heavy, so he can only madly compress his time to teach. After turning a corner, the trio grabbed Aiden. "What?" Aiden glanced at Ron. "Please, beg." Ron returned Aiden's pleading look. Aiden thought for a moment and asked, "Do you accept training in dreams?" "In a dream?" But wasn't the Mind Blade Duel Association disbanded? Hermione was very concerned about school developments, so she naturally knew this information. "Yes, but the venue is not abandoned. I made some slight modifications to it and I believe you will like it." Aiden smiled. He handed Hermione a net woven with silver-white silk threads. After receiving it, Hermione immediately understood how to use the net. "This..." Hermione was about to say something, but Aiden raised his finger to his lips. Then Aiden turned and left. In the following days, classes at Hogwarts continued, and Umbridge kept an eye on the trio every day. Finally, the clever Hermione came up with a solution. She cast a spell to change the numbers on the galleons and used them to convey the message. She turned an ordinary student gathering into a meeting point for an intelligence organization. Of course, the effect was immediate, and Umbridge tried her best but couldn't figure out how these people decided on the time for the party. Every time we rushed to capture them, the place was already empty. And in this strange atmosphere, the first official meeting of Harry's secret society was held. On Saturday night, everyone fell asleep early. A pink toad kept moving through the corridors of Hogwarts because she had exclusive information that confirmed that Harry and his friends would have a gathering tonight. A Sequence 3 Dreamweaver quietly passed by her and returned to Ravenclaw. Chapter 285. In the invisible dream, the students of the secret society felt like they were stuffed into a flush toilet, spinning non-stop. A dragon nestling in the clouds was holding a silk thread in its hand, shaking it continuously. "Teacher, stop playing." Nura sighed. "Oh, no." Long, who was smiling just now, realized that he had gone too far. "Hurry and put everyone in Hogwarts on the clouds." "Bloody hell, are we going to have to go through this every time we come here?" Ron helped a cloud stand up. Well, it's the first time it's open, and it's still in the debugging stage. It's stabilized now, and this situation won't happen next time." Aiden made excuses awkwardly. "Well, let's not waste too much time, we need to elect a leader for the society," Hermione suggested. Then everyone turned their eyes to Harry. "What? I mean, why not choose Aiden?" Harry was a little scared. "Kid, I don't have time to be in charge of your association. See these two kids? They are wizards sent by the Egyptian Ministry of Magic. I am also responsible for their teaching." Aiden pointed at Amin and Nura behind him. Amin secretly made a face at him and was then hit on the head by Nura with a knife. "Harry is the best, I think Harry is the best too, of course it's Harry Potter, the boy who survived." After unanimous election by everyone, Harry became the leader of the secret society. Next, they began to choose a name for the association. Anti-Umbridge Alliance, Ministry of Magic is an idiot group, Defense Society. Various names were proposed, but none of them seemed to satisfy others. Ginny suggested, why not choose a name that the Ministry of Magic fears the most, such as Dumbledore's Army? This suggestion was agreed by everyone, and the secret society was renamed Dumbledore's Army. "Well, I have to remind you that you can talk about Dumbledore's army behind their backs, but there should not be any paper records or signs." Aiden poured some cold water on them. "Why?" Ron asked in confusion. Because the Ministry of Magic attacked Dumbledore because it framed him for using students to secretly form an army. If the DA is discovered, then the rumor will be confirmed, putting Dumbledore in a passive position. You don't want to see Hogwarts fall completely into the hands of the Ministry of Magic, right? Aiden gave Ron a brief explanation. It didn't matter whether the little wizard next to him understood it or not. What was important was that Hermione started thinking about it. So, we need a name to use with the outside world. Hermione stroked her chin. Then let's call him Dream Chaser. Harry suggested, looking at the surrounding clouds. The leader's words, coupled with the code name, did not sound unpleasant, and everyone quickly unanimously passed the decision. Well, let's start the first activity of the association. Today's teaching is the disarming spell. Harry immediately went into teaching mode while Aiden paddled alongside. See? That girl named Luna is an example of a girl whose mental power was too great and affected her magic control. A dragon was sitting on a sofa made of clouds like an old woman, weaving something with silver-white silk threads. Ptamin was amused by Aiden's actions, and the channel he had woven in his hands was immediately disconnected. A ruler stretched out from Aiden's hand and hit Amin on the head with a snap. I told you to focus when using the power of the mind. Now you are using the thread of my spirit body. If you go back to Egypt and use your own reserves, how much accumulation will be wasted if you make it wrong? Aiden scolded. Tisk, got it. Amin pouted, and Nura next to him also quietly curled his lips. Puff, it seemed that she was also distracted, and Aiden, without any bias, also hit her on the head with a ruler. Sorry, teacher. Nura lowered her head. By the way, why did you suddenly start calling me teacher? Aiden waved his hand, indicating that the two could take a break. Because, a teacher is a teacher. Nura smiled at Aiden, but successfully overturned the jealous person next to her. Humph, maybe it's because a certain teacher is too attractive. Amin crossed his arms and shifted his gaze to the right. Nura sensed Amin's jealousy and reached out to touch his head, and he immediately returned to his previous state. Aiden secretly gave Nura a thumbs up. After practicing with the two for a while, Aiden sent them back to sleep. Creating channels is an extremely mentally taxing task, and two underage children have plenty of time to learn slowly. There is no need to rush them to learn quickly. This approach is not conducive to their growth and is not what a good teacher should do. It just so happens that Aiden, who has nothing to do, can join in the practice. Aiden pushed aside the clouds and walked in. Aiden. Ron and Hermione's sparring skills were no less than those of adult wizards. Even Ron, who had been trained by Aunt Molly for many years, still had the time to say hello to Aiden. No, you underestimate me. After all, Hermione had also gone through 3 years of training in the Dueling Association. Taking advantage of Ron's distraction, a disarming spell knocked his wand away. Haha. Aiden decisively laughed at his cousin. Shut up. Ron blushed. Seeing the two people decide the winner, the people around gathered together. We haven't had any activities for a long time. How about a duel? Aiden suggested. Me and you. Ron's eyes widened and he immediately started shaking his head. You, Harry and Hermione, George and Fred, and Ginny, come along too. Aiden happily invited them to a group fight. Really? George raised an eyebrow. You are not allowed to use those weird abilities of yours. Fred put forward the restriction. Okay, just use magic. Aiden nodded. You. Ron wanted to say something else, but was interrupted by Hermione's elbow. Don't be scared, he's your brother. Why don't you just tell him not to use magic instead of restricting him? Hermione couldn't help but complain. A dreamweaver who was stretching. After some warm-up exercises, the 7 people stood on the stage and confronted each other. Zacharias was in the middle as the referee. He raised the spell and launched a firework. Several people watched the fireworks rise into the air, explode, and the duel began. Ron cast a stunning spell on Aiden without any hesitation and said that this was definitely not a personal vendetta. Aiden closed his eyes and took a small step to the left, and the red spell shattered a cloud behind him. He is a telepath. Focus our fire on him to prevent him from reading our minds and evading attacks. Ron sold his brother's information without any hesitation. Then, Harry, Hermione, Ginny and the twins also started firing disarming charms at Aiden at the same time. Aiden lightly hooked his fingers, and the clouds that were shattered by Ron flew over and combined into a shield to block 4 disarming spells. The sudden appearance of the shield caused the 5 men to lose sight of Aiden. There was a flash of space, and Aiden appeared behind Ron. Your magic, technique, and accuracy have all improved so much. You've done a great job. Then, a hand with white light stretched out to Ron's forehead. Chapter 286, Long-awaited Duel. At such a critical moment, Ron suddenly raised his foot and headed straight for Aiden's lower body. Taking a step back slightly, Aiden's hand failed to touch Ron's forehead. At the same time, Ron rolled backwards to distance himself from Aiden. Aiden wanted to attack again, but 4 stunning spells were already heading straight for him. To pieces! Ginny fired the crushing spell at Aiden without hesitation. The crushing spell hit Aiden and he exploded in the air. Ginny, you killed him! Michael Corner, who was watching, cried out in horror. Shut up! At this time, Ginny felt that it was a bit hasty for her to develop a friendship with this guy that went beyond friendship. The Aiden particles in the air were flying and slowly transformed into a group of butterflies. Oh, my lovely little sister, how could you be so cruel? A group of butterflies surrounded Ginny, and one of her hands was made up of butterflies. To pieces! Ginny blew Aiden to pieces again without hesitation. At the same time, George operated to Ginny and operated her out. More and more butterflies appeared, and finally the outline of a dragon was outlined. It was just a dragon. The silver dragon quietly completed its transformation under the concealment of the butterfly swarm. He opened his mouth and sprayed a breath of dragon towards the 6 people. Armor. 6 icicles stood in place, while the ground behind them froze in a fan-shaped pattern. The 6 people cancelled the armor spell and walked out on the ice. George, Fred, is there any way to deal with that? Harry asked. If you don't die here, you won't die. There was no playfulness in George's eyes as before. We really want to turn around and run, Fred added to George's words. Roar. The dragon flying in the sky roared. Expelliarmus. Harry took the lead in the attack. Aiden made a deft turn in the sky, avoiding the rays of the disarming spell. Then it began to dive towards the few people. Here it comes. Ron raised his wand. There are many obstacles. Many obstacles. Ginny and Hermione also took out their wands and cast the barrier charm. Harry and the twins worked together to cast spells on Aiden to slow down his dive speed. But the 3 people's spells bounced off immediately when they hit Aiden's dragon scales. As Aiden dived, the defense summoned by the barrier spell rubbed against Aiden's claws, making a sharp, harsh sound. Flame. Ron fired a fire spell, but without the support of magic, the barrier spell was torn apart. George and Fred pulled up Hermione and Ginny respectively, and Ginny also grabbed Harry, and they operated away and avoided the overwhelming flames. Flames covered Ron, and at the same time Aiden breathed out a breath of dragon. Ron, who was forced into the realm of ice and fire, became the first to be eliminated. The collision of flames and dragon breath stirred up a large amount of water mist. Aiden took the opportunity to retract his body, and a dragon man walked out of the smoke. Be careful, this is his most difficult stage. George reminded the people behind him. Aiden raised his right hand, and a black walnut wand appeared in his hand. The reason why the new magic was not used was because only a few of the people present had learned the new magic. In order to teach them attack and defense to the greatest extent possible based on traditional magic, Aiden and his companions put a lot of thought into it. Accept your weapons. Several people fired spells at Aiden again. Aiden raised his wand and, like a baton, gathered the surrounding clouds. The clouds squirmed and turned into green vines. The vines grew and a large net was woven. The vines grew and attacked the people, and Harry cut the tentacles into pieces with a cutting spell. Ginny wanted to help, but a dangerous feeling rushed from her spine to her brain. At some point, Aiden's wand was against her back. Falling unconscious. The spell flashed and Ginny lost consciousness. Expelliarmus, break to pieces, relaxation, gradually shrinking. 4 spells flew towards Aiden, but they only stirred up a large cloud of mist. With the help of the mist, Aiden's figure was hidden again. This won't work. We need to force him out. Hermione looked at Harry. Joint spell. Hermione raised her wand and used a weather spell to create a tornado in her dream. Flame. Harry cast a fire spell on the tornado. A flaming tornado swept across the site. Hey! A cold breathing sound echoed. The entire tornado was instantly frozen by the cold air. Snap! A snapping sound came from the tornado ice block, and the entire ice block exploded. Aiden's figure appeared in front of them again. He is too strong. His magic skills, body, and control over the mind, how can we deal with him? Hermione frowned. I know a little bit of occlumency. Harry raised his hand, and the few of them looked at each other and instantly arranged a tactic. George and Fred charged at Aiden, both unleashing a barrage of disarming spells simultaneously. Aiden stood in place and swung his wand, accurately blocking the disarming spells fired by the two men. Retreat 3 feet. Aiden hooked his finger, and George and Fred were knocked away. At the same time, the tip of his wand flashed red, 2 stunning spells flew out, and George and Fred left the stage. Powerful blast. Hermione cast an enhanced blasting spell beside Aiden. Armor protects me. Aiden released the armor spell without hesitation. The smoke dispersed and Hermione had arrived in front of Aiden, with a silver-white light emitting from her wand. What? Aiden was stunned. Silence. Hermione cast a spell, and the halo focused on Aiden, instantly destroying his armor spell. Aiden only had time to push with his right hand, and Hermione flew out. Expelliarmus. Harry, who had quietly sneaked up behind Aiden at some point, launched a fatal attack on him. Powerful magic power gathered on the wand, and the red lightning formed by the spell cut through the air and hit Aiden. Finally, with their cooperation, Aiden's wand flew out of his hand. Yes. Hermione in the distance got up from the ground and made a fist. Pa, pa, pa. Aiden applauded them. Well done. At the same time, he waved his hand to pull the others back. Ron's expression was very proud at this moment. We defeated Aiden. We actually defeated that Aiden. Hermione couldn't stand it anymore and gave him a slap. It's a group fight, and you're the first one to be eliminated. So what? He's Aiden. Ron's tail was almost up to the sky. So what am I in your mind, a monster? Aiden couldn't help but complain. Forget it, that's not the point. Did you learn anything from the duel just now? Aiden turned to look at the bystanders. Defense is important. The little wizards below came to a unanimous conclusion. Yes, any magical struggle is a battle of offense and defense, which can be simply summed up as hitting, dodging, and defending. For you right now, the most important skills you need to master are attack and defense, so after this week's activities are over, you need to firmly master the disarming spell when you return, understand? A certain Professor Dragon couldn't help but suffer from his occupational disease and started to babble. I really feel like he's becoming more and more like a professor. Ron whispered into Harry's ear. But when he was swept by Aiden's death gaze, he immediately became obedient. Chapter 287. After the event, Harry and Chu Zhang huddled together to chat. Chu Zhang's roommate Marietta gave them a sour look and then exited the dream. What's wrong with her? Harry asked confused. Don't take it personally. Chu Zhang whispered, she didn't really want to come. I asked them to come with me. You know her mother works at the Ministry of Magic and won't let her do anything to provoke Umbridge. After exchanging pleasantries for a while, the two exited the dream. Aiden folded the dream and put it away, waiting for next use. In the next 2 weeks, they held 2 events each. With the training of a few good friends, Neville was able to use the disarming spell slowly. Harry saw the progress of his companions and felt much better every time Umbridge asked him to recite in class. As always, Aiden taught Amin and Nura how to make the mind channel every night. Before we knew it, it was already November. The annual Quidditch Cup at Hogwarts is about to be held again. Because Umbridge wanted to use the Quidditch card to restrain Harry, until Professor McGonagall, who could no longer bear it, found Dumbledore. Dumbledore put pressure on Umbridge to force her way through the Gryffindor Quidditch team. However, the reorganized Quidditch team only had 3 weeks of training left. Angelina was so anxious that she tied Harry to the court for training almost every day. Amin and Nura have completed their basic training, and all that's left is for them to practice on their own. There was still a long time before the time agreed with Emir, and Aiden finally got some free time. Secretly leaving everyone behind, Aiden went to the room of requirement alone. Inside the room where every wish is granted, there is a room hidden by Aiden, which is wrapped with countless silver threads by Aiden. The silk threads twisted to form special symbols and were wrapped in a large circle to form an alchemical matrix. At the very center of the matrix, a locket is suspended. That's right, this is the nearly 1,000-year-long plan left by the joint efforts of Eden and Salazar. If senior sister Tom knew that she was betrayed by her ancestors and outsiders, she would probably be so angry that her new nose would be crooked. Aiden stood in front of the locket, extended his index finger, and the silk thread began to wrap around the locket in a regular pattern. After a long period of analysis, Aiden successfully found the location of Voldemort's soul. When the silk thread was connected to the pendant, a black silk thread also wrapped around it. The two colored threads were entangled together, and Aiden took the opportunity to stuff his crystal-clear dreams in through the threads. At first, the black silk thread tried to resist, but a blue light flickered on the pendant box, and all the water droplets in the dream were absorbed in at once. When the dream bubbles completely filled the locket, Aiden slipped in easily. The dream carefully woven by the Sequence 3 weaver for Voldemort even affected the King of the Deep. What's more, now only 1/7 of the soul is left, which is tainted with some chaotic aura. Wandering in dreams, the whole world is under the control of dragons. He stretched out his finger and hooked it, and the dream began to rotate and fold, and a woman with a good figure was sent over. Oh, the changes in the main soul can actually affect the split souls. Is there some kind of quantum entanglement between you two? Aiden looked at her curiously, snapped his fingers, and the soul that was fixed on Voldemort melted away. Aiden, Pruitt, you damn guy, you Ms. Fu began to explore the beauty of language. After taking out the small bottle and locking Ms. Volt, who was exploring the beauty of words, inside, Aiden left the locket. In the room where everything is granted, as Aiden's figure appeared, all the threads began to shrink into his body. The locket also flew all the way to his hand, but a blue light flashed. The figure of a tall and thin man emerged. Long time no see, Aiden. The man smiled at Aiden. Long time no see, Salazar. Aiden greeted him. How long has it been? Salazar asked. It's been 1,000 years, Aiden answered. It's been 1,000 years. It's great that our ideals still exist on Earth. And this is the secret room designed by Rowena. Salazar looked around and then found a place to sit down. Where did you go after you left? Aiden asked casually. After parting with them, I traveled to another continent, where I resumed my research on chaos. In the end, it was discovered that the guy was a twin of order and could draw strength from both people's desires and the real environment. This is probably why he can become the strongest king of the deep world. Aiden, you must be careful of him, even though he was defeated by us before. Salazar solemnly reminded Aiden. But, he is now hanging out with your only offspring. A dragon narrowed his eyes and teased. Alas, it's all fate. When necessary, kill my descendants and don't consider me. Salazar said, and a blue light began to emerge from his figure. It seems I can't stay for too long, Aiden. It must be hard for you to watch over the past 1,000 years in secret. Finally, Salazar turned around suddenly and gave Aiden a gentle smile. Oh, how could it not be known? The young man's clear laughter echoed in the empty secret room. On the other side, the match between Gryffindor and Slytherin ended. Although Slytherin's trick was very dirty, Harry managed to catch the snitch under pressure and win. After the game, Draco mocked Ron for losing the game. Unable to hold back, Harry and the twins went up to beat him up, but Umbridge successfully confiscated their brooms and banned them from the game for life. Dolores, I don't think you have that power. Professor McGonagall, who couldn't bear it any longer, stood up. Power, Minerva, would you like to see the latest Order 26 granted to me by the Ministry of Magic? Umbridge said with her hands on her hips, extremely proud. Hermione next to her clenched her wand, but Aiden suddenly intervened and stood in front of her, preventing Hermione from exploding on the spot. Although Gryffindor won the game, losing 3 players at once caused their morale to plummet. Harry and Ron almost got into a fight, but the news Aiden brought calmed them down. Hagrid is back. Aiden didn't say anything else, but just used a soothing word to calm the anger of the two. Let's go see him. Harry suggested immediately. But Umbridge's educational order forbids us to leave the castle at this time. Hermione pointed to the pink toad standing on the high platform overlooking everything. The 3 then turned their attention to Aiden, who was fiddling with the locket. Well, let's go. Aiden also knew what they meant, so he gave them invisibility and walked towards the Forbidden Forest. Chapter 288, Giant Rebellion, Final Lesson. The group arrived at Hagrid's hut and knocked on his door. Hagrid looked terrible at the moment, his hair was a mess and covered in blood. His left eye was swollen into a slit, blue and purple, and his face and hands were covered with scars. Some were still bleeding, and he moved very carefully, as it looked like they might have broken ribs. Merlin, Hagrid, how did you get hurt like this? Ron exclaimed. Oh, it's you, come in. Hagrid pushed open the door and invited them in. Inside the house, Hagrid was sitting on the sofa, and Fang was gnawing on a piece of green dragon meat. Hagrid snatched the dragon meat from Fang's mouth and applied it to his face. This action made Hermione, who was a dentist, clench her teeth, and Aiden even heard the sound of teeth colliding. Forget it, let me help you. Aiden took out his wand. Healed like new. With the stimulation of Aiden's magic, Hagrid's collapsed ribs began to repair. The bone healing process could be described as torture, and Hagrid, feeling uncomfortable, wanted to reach out and grab it. But Aiden hurriedly stopped him and bit his finger, and a small ball of silver blood floated in the air. Aiden used his wand to touch the blood clot, and it spread out like mist and penetrated into Hagrid's skin. Soon, all of Hagrid's wounds were repaired. Your blood actually has this effect. Ron raised his eyebrows. Can I? No. Aiden didn't even give him a chance to finish. Suddenly, there was another knock on the door of Hagrid's hut. Open the door, Senior Investigator of the Ministry of Magic, Umbridge. A sweet voice came out and Hagrid's eyes widened immediately. Aiden raised his wand and the men disappeared. Hagrid felt a little relieved and walked over to open the door. Oh, you are the former professor of care of magical creatures. Listen, I will be observing your teaching for the next period of time, so be prepared. Also, as a professor at Hogwarts, what have you been doing for such a long time away from school? Umbridge tried to get information indirectly. Well, just some family things. You know we are half-bloods. Hagrid said with an embarrassed expression. When Umbridge heard the word half-blood, her disgust was written all over her face. Then she shook her head, walked out of Hagrid's hut, and sprayed a lot of perfume outside the hut in disgust. Aiden snapped his fingers and the men reappeared. Hagrid, you have to tell us what you did. Even Dumbledore can't send you to do something dangerous without a reason. Hermione looked at him seriously. Don't lie, we have a telepath here. Ron threatened. Okay, I'll tell you, but it's top secret and don't let it out. Hagrid bent down and looked at them. Dumbledore sent me to negotiate with the giant. Giant? Hermione raised her voice. Hush! Hagrid put his finger in front of his mouth and looked around. In order to get rid of Fudge's surveillance, I first went to France and searched for the giant in Europe with Maxim. Finally we found them on a high ground in northern Europe, and I gave them Dumbledore's gift. At the same time, I also gained their friendship. Just when I thought they would turn to us, a rebellion broke out among them. The new Giant King accepted the recruitment of the Death Eaters, and we were driven out. Hagrid looked downcast. Did they beat you? Hermione's voice was a little distressed. Yeah, not really. Hagrid shrugged. But it's not all bad news, at least some of them still think well of Dumbledore. Moreover, I found news of my mother in the gathering place of giants, although she was dead. At this moment, the expression on Hagrid's face was very strange, crying and laughing at the same time. I'm afraid it's more than that. Aiden raised an eyebrow. Hagrid winked at Aiden desperately. Seeing him like this, Aiden didn't want to interfere in his family disputes. Hermione and the other two were so immersed in Hagrid's story that they didn't notice his expression. By the way, Hagrid, please don't create any more blast-tailed Skrewts or Chimeras, or Umbridge will definitely find a way to fire you. Hermione almost begged. Okay, I'll do my best. Hagrid nodded and stood up. Well, it's about time, you should go back. Hagrid said. The group walked out of the cabin and prepared to return to the castle. Before leaving, Hagrid said something to Harry. Harry, be careful, the storm is coming. In the Care of Magical Creatures class the next day, Hagrid followed Hermione's advice and chose the Thestral he had tamed. Hagrid prepared a large piece of meat and fed it to the Thestrals, but what he didn't expect was that only very few young wizards could see the Thestrals. So for most people, the scene was horrifying as they watched the beef being eaten away bit by unknown creatures. Umbridge also took advantage of the situation and frantically recorded bad things about Hagrid on her little board. Hermione was so angry that she wanted to punch her on the spot, but was stopped by Ron. Because Christmas is approaching, to held its last event. At the same time, Ammon and Nura are about to part with Aiden, which makes Aiden a little depressed in his dream tonight. Teacher, I will miss you. Nura gave Aiden a hug. Humph. Although Ammon pouted, Aiden still felt the desire from him. Aiden waved and he flew over, and the three of them hugged each other. Okay, you can slowly develop advanced technology, there will be plenty of time in the future anyway. But, tonight, as the last class, I will show you something different. Aiden waved his hand and cut off the dream, but the members who were immersed in practicing spells did not notice their departure. Aiden integrated his memories into the dream and began to play for them the scenes of his encounter with the King of the Deep. The sequence 3 dream weavers isolate them from pollution and use the spiritual threads woven in dreams to maintain their sanity. Aiden let his 2 disciples truly face the King of the Deep realm. Teacher, this is... Nura hesitated. Yes, they are our future enemies. As the next person in charge of the Silent Slate, you should fight against them. Aiden nodded. Although Amin on the side was a little afraid, he still mustered up the courage to shout out. I will protect you, Nura. And of course, the teacher. Then I'll wait and see. A gentle smile appeared on Aiden's delicate face. He placed his hand on Amin's head and rubbed it gently. I hope that one day you will understand that our daily fight against the abyss is actually for this scene to be repeated over and over again. Aiden spoke words that Amin and Nura could not understand, but this did not prevent them from deeply recording the teacher's image in their minds. Many years later, Nura, who became the Minister of Magic of Egypt, and Amin, who was in charge of the solar boat, still often remembered their teacher's teachings in their dreams. Chapter 289. The day before the Christmas holiday, everyone participated in Da's last online event in their dreams. Amin and Nura were taken home by Amir. Above the dream, a dragon was lying on the clouds like a dead fish. So, the course ends here. Our reunion will have to wait until after the holiday, so please practice diligently after you return. As Harry finished his words, a cry of loss was heard around him. Oh southeast arrow on northeast arrow. Also, everyone has performed very well today. I believe your efforts will be rewarded. After Harry finished his speech, the young wizards around him applauded him. After the event, many young wizards came forward to say goodbye to Harry. The twins also pestered him, ready to ask Harry's advice on whether some of the props they had developed could poison Umbridge. Unfortunately, he was dismissed by Harry, who walked through the crowd and came in front of Chu Jong. At this moment, Chu Jong was staring at the Quidditch image displayed on the dream clouds. Are you okay? I heard Umbridge punished you. Harry's tone revealed concern. It's okay, it's just that there were some changes at home, and when I think about... Chu Jong looked depressed. The dragon above the clouds simply grabbed some popcorn and watched the two people getting closer and closer. Oh, they kissed each other. Aiden smiled wickedly and touched the monocle on his left eye. The dream ended, and Harry walked to the common room in a daze. The sun had risen, mercifully spreading its light to all living things. Harry, why are you so slow? Ron muttered. Because. A dragon with a funny expression put his arm around Ron from the left and also leaned into the sofa. Aiden. Hermione turned around and recognized the person. Our innocent Harry just had his first kiss. Aiden ignored the two of them and shared the fresh melon. What? Hermione put away the letter and hurried over, and the three of them sat on the sofa. Harry walked to the carpet and sat down, looking at the three guys holding melons, speechless. So, how does it feel? Ron asked expectantly. Yeah, it's wet. We are in a dream, so why do we feel the kiss so clearly? Or is it that some dream maker projected his own feelings into it? Harry directed the fire to the dragon watching the show nearby. No, this dream is a lucid dream, constructed based on your own physical condition and reality. If you think she's wet, it can only be, ahem, Chu Jong looks like she's about to cry. A certain dragon expressed that he was really worried about the continuation of this book, and abruptly changed the subject. Your kissing skills can't be that bad. Ron teased. These words made his mother unhappy. After all, it was a good thing that her pigs learned to dig up cabbages. Harry's kiss was certainly memorable and Cho has been crying a lot lately. Don't you understand how she feels? The changes in her family, falling in love with Harry but being afraid that Umbridge will target her mother. There's also the fear of graded exams and the possibility of being kicked off the team if you're bad at Quidditch. These complex emotions intertwine together to make Chu so sad. He, emotion, master, frowned. A person who worries about so many things will explode. And what are you doing? Ron looked at Hermione who was still writing. Writing to Crumb, who else is like you, with the emotional span of only a teaspoon. Hermione rolled her eyes. But Hermione didn't realize that the teaspoon was filled with aged vinegar. Ron didn't say anything for a long time. He finished his paper angrily, cursed Krum, broke away from Aiden, and walked out. What's wrong with him? Hermione looked at Aiden puzzledly. Youth. Aiden raised an eyebrow at her. Hermione was confused and went upstairs with the letter in her arms. Aiden, Harry hesitated to speak. You didn't feel happy when you kissed Chew, right? It wasn't like the feeling in the storybooks with flowers blooming and insects chirping as accompaniment. Aiden immediately pointed out his problem. So, wait, you were peeping. Harry finally realized and his face turned red. Baby, you kissed me in the dream I created. Do you still expect me to accurately block your hormone surge? After all, I don't know what you are thinking. No way, a certain dragon just wants to see the first love of the innocent savior. But the facts also proved that Harry might not like Chew as much as he thought. Maybe he just fell in love with the strong woman who once dominated the court. Make a note of this and give it to Ginny later, Aiden muttered. Remember what? Harry tilted his head. No, Christmas is coming up in a few days. I just thought of a gift for you and I'm going to keep it in mind for now. And bye. Aiden responded casually, stood up and walked out of the Gryffindor common room. A peaceful day passed. Although it was close to the Christmas holiday, all the professors completed their last classes diligently. That night, Ministry of Magic, Department of Mysteries. Arthur, who had been tired all day, was assigned to be on duty at the Department of Mysteries. He crossed his legs and took the tea brought by the director. Speaking of which, you guys have such a strong martial spirit here, why do you still need us to guard you? Arthur was a little confused. Because we are constrained by the Ministry of Magic. Look, those bugs there are so arrogant now, with so many prohibitions. The director held his forehead helplessly and handed Arthur a large stack of resolutions covered with Fudge's signature. So, what should I do tonight? As a veteran in the Ministry of Magic, Arthur was keenly aware of the conspiracy. That is, let your nephew tell you. The director reached into his pocket and pulled out a white net. Net. Arthur was curious. The water droplets on the web gathered towards the center, and soon a projection of Aiden emerged. If you have something to say, say it quickly. Is there, Uncle? Aiden was choked. Oh, hello Aiden, is this some new magic? Arthur asked curiously. No, why are you contacting me in the middle of the night? Aiden asked curiously. Well, he asked me about that matter, and I wasn't sure whether I should tell him, so I wanted to ask you. The director spread his hands and squeezed into the picture. Ah! Aiden sighed. You know, the struggle in the Ministry of Magic has now entered a white-hot stage. How will you be treated as a person labelled as a Dumbledore faction? Aiden asked. Isn't it just being excluded? Arthur was a little confused. In his simple opinion, being marginalized was not a big deal. Don't you see that the Weasley family holds the right to mint coins and lives a contented life in the wizarding world? If only it were that simple. Aiden shook his head helplessly. Chapter 290. Arthur is attacked, early vacation. Uncle, first of all, we need to clarify a concept. How do you think the Ministry of Magic gained the power to rule over the scattered wizards? Aiden did not rush to answer Arthur's question, but instead asked another question. Aurors, or the coalition forces of the Wizarding Council. Arthur said uncertainly. You also know the Wizarding Council. Weasley is really. The director muttered beside him. Wrong, neither of them. If a wizard is determined to live in seclusion, even someone as powerful as Dumbledore won't be able to find him. Aiden denied Arthur's answer. Then, the problem now is obvious. In those challenging times, in order to deal with the invasion of other races, wizards banded together to form the Wizard Council. The Wizard Council's management power over wizards comes from the wizard's voluntary surrender, not from the rule obtained by violence. Aiden's signal fluctuated, and then the door to the dream opened and Aiden walked out. The result is that the will of wizards protects the Wizarding Council, or the Ministry of Magic now. Likewise, the relationship between the two sides is like water and fish, inseparable. Aiden found a seat and sat down. But what does this have to do with me? Arthur brought the question back to the point. In the Ministry of Magic right now, there is a fierce struggle between the conservatives led by Fudge and the reformists led by Bones. As purebloods, as people whose surnames are engraved in the misty fantasy, we will naturally be caught up in this storm when we encounter it. You can't try to stay neutral by just muddling through, and Percy has already made a bet for the Weasley family. Aidan explained. When Arthur heard Percy's name, he was gloomy at first, but then he quickly felt relieved. So, now in the Ministry of Magic's impression, my Weasley family has become a hypocrite who is betting on both sides, right? Arthur understood a little. Yes, so I plan to use Sister Tom to send you out of the Ministry of Magic for a while. Aidan nodded. How about it, do you agree? The director also turned his gaze to Arthur. Okay, let's do it. Arthur nodded. Inside the Department of Mysteries, everyone discussed a countermeasure, and the director cooperated by withdrawing the defense forces of the Hall of Prophecy. And under the cover of night, a giant snake sneaked into the Department of Mysteries. The big snake wandered around the prophecy hall, looking for a crystal ball. When passing by Arthur, he suddenly woke him up. Arthur raised his wand and attacked the snake, but the spells were bounced off by the magic on her body when they hit the snake. Finally, the big snake suddenly wrapped around Arthur and bit him several times, leaving him bloody. This portrait was transmitted to 3 places through some mysterious connection. The first person to receive the memory was Harry, who was also in England and was sleeping. The second person to receive the memory was Senior Sister Tom, who was hiding in Europe. Who did she seem to be riding on at this moment? The third thing to receive the memory was naturally the glass bottle in Aidan's pocket. Because Aidan had cast some kind of mystical hidden spell on it, its distance from the other residual souls was infinitely close and yet infinitely far away. In Hogwarts, Harry was awakened by a nightmare and woke up Ron first. Ron, hurry, go to the Department of Mysteries, Mr. Weasley has been attacked by something. Harry held his forehead. Neville heard the noise and quickly ran out to find Professor McGonagall. Professor McGonagall rushed to the headmaster's office with a few people. In the Department of Mysteries, Arthur picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at Aidan. It really hurts, would you like some painkillers? Arthur even had the leisure to joke. You're awesome. Aidan took out some painkillers and fed them to him, then put the test tube of medicine into his hand. Just say you carried it with you afterwards. Aidan said, and returned to Hogwarts in a flash of space. Just then, a silver phoenix flew in and told Aidan to hurry to the principal's office. Aidan hurriedly changed into his pajamas and rushed to the principal's office. In the office, the Weasley children were all there, and Harry stood in the middle, telling about what he had seen and heard. Evra, it is Arthur who is guarding tonight. Send our people to rescue him. Dumbledore gave the order directly to the portrait. Fawkes, go inform Molly and keep an eye on Umbridge. The phoenix disappeared with a cry. Finally, Dumbledore picked up the silverware on the table and tapped it. The instrument started working immediately, making a rhythmic tinkling sound, and a wisp of light green smoke spewed out of the small silver tube on the top, which gathered and swirled in the air. After a few seconds, a few wisps of smoke turned into a steady stream of smoke, which grew thicker and thicker, swirling in the air. The top turned into a snake head with its mouth wide open. In separate essences, right? Dumbledore asked again. Silver gave him an affirmative answer. Dumbledore breathed a sigh of relief. Soon the portrait returned with the news that Arthur had been rescued and the Dark Lord's goal had not been achieved. Phineas, go back to the Black Mansion and inform Sirius. We need to send the children over. Dumbledore ordered again. Harry, who was repeatedly ignored, felt a deep rage in his heart. He couldn't help but move and wanted to bite Dumbledore. But Aidan's hand was on his shoulder, and a crisp bell rang out, and Harry calmed down. Professor, what's wrong with me? Harry asked. Your connection with her is too deep. Calm down and practice occlumency. Aidan frowned. After hearing this, Harry followed Aidan's instructions and tried his best to control his brain. But his still immature skills could not resist this connection. Oh my god, is Sirius slacking off? Aidan held his forehead and prepared to go forward and knock Harry unconscious. But Dumbledore stopped him. Leave it to them, and take your family back to the Black House. Dumbledore raised his wand, ready to find something to rub the portkey with, but the room full of valuable silver made him reluctant to do so. Let me do it. Aidan snapped his fingers. A dragon-shaped patronus rose up and swallowed Ron, Ginny, and the twins, before he also turned into mist and dissipated. The guardian angel led a few people through the sea of collective subconsciousness, and soon they arrived at the Black Mansion. Sirius came to greet them, exhausted, and told Creaker, who was cursing at the door, to get out. George and Fred wanted to go to St. Mungo's to see their father immediately, but Sirius stopped them. Fred and Sirius had a quarrel, but in the end, it was Sirius who took out Butterbeer to appease them. Everyone stayed in the Black Mansion until 3 in the morning, when Mrs. Molly hurried over and told them that Arthur was out of danger. Chapter 291. Everyone was so preoccupied with Arthur's affairs that they didn't notice Creaker's disappearance. After it left the room, it went to Malfoy Manor. Restricted by the requirements of the contract, Creaker could not reveal the inside story of the Order of the Phoenix. However, he still revealed the news that Harry and Sirius were as close as father and son to another member of the Black family, Narcissa Malfoy. The next day, everyone changed into Muggle clothes and took the subway to St. Mungo's to visit Arthur. Moody and Tonks were among them. Tonks was interested in Harry's dream of Arthur being attacked, but Harry didn't want to mention it. "Boy, you don't have the bloodline of a prophet, do you?" Moody guessed. "No." Harry felt insulted somehow as he thought of Trelawney shivering in the cold wind. Everyone came to a busy street in the centre of London, but strangely, there was a dilapidated and closed department store in the centre of this busy street. Several people pushed open the door, revealing the hospital inside. We arrived at a ward in the biological injury department on the second floor, where Arthur was lying. Dad! Ron, Ginny, and the twins ran over. All right. I'm fine, right?" Arthur comforted the children. Aiden wanted to go over, but an iron hand grabbed the back of his collar and carried him out of the ward. "Now, tell me clearly what the hell you two are up to." Molly lowered her voice, and it was obvious that she had discovered something unusual. "What a trick! Is there any hidden story behind my uncle's injury?" Aiden acted cute. Mrs. Molly stared at him and raised her fist. "Ahem, well." Long decisively admitted his mistake and told Molly what had happened. "Oh, Percy." It was obvious that Molly had no way to deal with her third son who had a strong desire for power. "By the way, how did you find out about the scheme my uncle and I set up?" Aiden asked. "Who taught you how to use potions first? And with his character, how could he happen to have painkillers on him?" Madame Molly rolled her eyes. "Ah, what a mistake! I didn't think of that." Aiden's fist slammed into his palm, and in the same rhythm was Mrs. Molly's fist, which also hit Aiden's head. "Don't do these things next time. Do you know how worried I was when I received the news?" Molly changed her fists into palms and ruffled Aiden's hair. "Should we tell them?" Aiden pouted at the twins, Ron, and Ginny. "Forget it, let's not let them know this. The more they know, the easier it will be to get involved." Molly stared at Aiden as she spoke. I know. I'll keep it a secret." Aiden raised his hands in surrender. Inside the ward, Arthur chatted with the children for a while and then turned around and started chatting with his fellow patients. "Hey, buddy, what bit you?" "Werewolf." The wizard lying next to him hung his head. "Wolf, cheer up buddy, my friend is also a werewolf and he's doing pretty well. Besides, you are in luck, my nephew has found a cure for werewolves and has made it public." Arthur boasted. Unexpectedly, the wizard on the other side lowered his head after hearing this. "Good time, how about giving this good time to you?" Then he turned away and stopped talking to Arthur. "What's wrong with him?" Arthur asked when he saw Aiden and Molly coming back. "Well, the cure for werewolves requires the use of phoenix tears, and there is no substitute for it yet, so the cost of the cure is too high for the average werewolf to afford," Aiden explained to him. Hearing the word costly, Arthur cast a look of pity at the wizard in the next bed. Then, a few adults wanted to discuss something and kicked them out. Since they were at St. Mungo's this time, they couldn't cast a spell on the door, so George and Fred plugged the retractable earplugs in. "Dumbledore suspects that Harry is possessed by a mysterious being." Moody's voice came from the receiver. Several people looked at Harry with strange eyes. After Harry heard it, his heart sank. He felt that he was not worthy of being with everyone, so he turned around and walked towards a higher floor. Ron, Ginny, and Aiden hurried after him. The few of them walked and stopped all the way to the 5th floor, where they finally stopped Harry. "Okay Harry, you heard it too. Dumbledore is just suspicious. Don't worry too much," Ron advised. "No, you don't know that feeling, and I think Dumbledore was right. That night, it was as if I had turned into that snake and attacked Mr. Weasley. Could it be that I am the snake, transformed at night and sent out by Voldemort to attack Mr. Weasley?" Harry was very afraid that he would suddenly attack and hurt someone. Poof! Aiden couldn't help but laugh out loud. What are you laughing at? Ron nudged him. Harry, look. Aiden raised his hand, and a silver dragon shuttled between his fingers. Is this a patroness? Harry looked at the little silver dragon. This is also my animagus form. Aiden reluctantly held Harry's shoulders and continued his story. My uncle's wound was obviously caused by a magical creature. If Senior Tom can exempt you from the training, one step beyond ordinary animagus, becoming a magical creature, then she is not the Dark Lord, she should be called the Forerunner. Aiden winked at Harry. Yeah Harry, relax, Ron said soothingly. Relax, why, is anyone in a nervous state? A voice came from behind. A blonde, blue-eyed wizard in a lilac robe bared his handsome teeth at them. Gilderoy Lockhart. Several people recognized the man. Oh, who is Gilderoy Lockhart? Never mind. Here is my autographed photo for you. Lockhart smiled and sent each of them a photo with his name on it. Toot. Good fellow, you are worthy of it, Dumbledore. Aiden secretly gave a thumbs up to a certain old bee in his heart. After leaving St. Mungo's, Mundungus got a car cast with a traceless extension spell and transported the Weasley family back to the Black Mansion. On the way, Harry kept touching the back of his head, worried that he would suddenly turn into Quirrell. A face of Voldemort grew on the back of his head. Even after arriving at the Black Mansion, he had packed his bags and prepared to leave, so as not to turn into a giant snake again and hurt people. It seemed that he didn't take Aiden's comfort to heart at all. Worried, Harry carried his luggage downstairs, and then, he was suppressed by Aiden, who was guarding the door. Let me go, Aiden, I will kill all of you. Harry's tone was full of self-blame. Kid, try to see if you can break free from my hands. Who else do you want to harm under my hands? Aiden smiled at Harry. Chapter 292, Longbottom Family, Christmas Party. Just as Harry was struggling hard and wondering how Aiden's slender body could have such tremendous strength, there was a knock on the door of the Black Mansion, and Sirius, who was watching the two people fighting on the sofa, took out his wand. After signaling for everyone to be quiet, he walked towards the door cautiously. Aiden already knew who was coming, but in order to make this guy who was only watching the show anxious, Aiden deliberately did not speak. Pushing the door open, Sirius was delighted to find Mr. and Mrs. Longbottom. Frank, Alice. Sirius gave them a hug. How, I heard that you were. Realizing his own gaffe, Sirius stopped himself in time. My mother said we should thank a descendant of the Pruitt family. We heard that he was here, so we came to visit him with gifts. Frank raised the package in his hand. Come in. Sirius invited them in warmly. Inside the house, Aiden regained his dignified demeanor in a second when he heard the guest coming. The change was so great that Harry's eyes widened. After all, after receiving such a long period of training from Madame Rowena at Hogwarts, Aiden could also behave a little like the heir of an ancient wizarding family. Hello, Mr. and Ms. Longbottom. Aiden saluted them. Don't be so reserved. Actually, we should thank you for your help. Frank put the things on the table. Harry wanted to see the gift, but his view was blocked by Sirius, who was more anxious than him. My visit today is a bit intrusive, but it is enough for me to see the face of my benefactor. I will take my leave first. Frank grabbed his hat. Wait, now that Frank is here, why not stay and spend Christmas with us? Sirius suggested. But Neville and my mother are still at home. Frank looked embarrassed. Then I'll go pick them up. Aiden stood up. After exchanging a glance with his wife, Frank gladly accepted Sirius' invitation. My home is in. Frank was about to speak, but Aiden already knew through the ripples in the ocean of collective subconsciousness. It's okay, I know. Then Aiden disappeared into the room in a flash. What is he doing? Frank asked curiously. It should be a telepath. Alice answered his question. Godric's Hollow, Longbottom House. Aiden appeared at the door and knocked, and the sound of running was heard from inside the house. Aiden. It was Neville who opened the door, and he was delighted with Aiden's arrival. Neville, is your grandma here? I'll take you to the Black Mansion to spend Christmas together. Your parents have agreed. Aiden winked at him. Oh, that's great, Grandma. Neville shouted as he ran inside. After a while, an old woman wearing a vulture hat came out with Neville. I'm sorry to trouble you, Mr. Pruitt. Mrs. Longbottom smiled at Aiden. No, Neville and I are friends, you don't have to be so polite. Aiden nodded. Then he grabbed the two and operated to Grimmauld Place. Coincidentally, the Weasley family, who were out buying food, also arrived at the square. Aunt Aiden greeted them and they all walked into the Black Mansion together. The originally gloomy Black Mansion unexpectedly ushered in the warmest moment. Sirius decorated the old house with many Christmas decorations. The Longbottoms got a giant Christmas tree to cover up the offending family tree wallpaper. Arthur got a lot of Santa hats and stuffed the rest onto the heads of the house elves hung on the wall after each person received one. This place, which was filled with Sirius' sad memories, now gave him a sense of home. At night, everyone sat in the Black family's dining room, and Aiden cast a traceless extension spell on the room. Then let me say a few words. Sirius, as the host, stood up with his glass in hand. My godson has given me a family again, so here's to Harry. To Harry. Mrs. Molly waved her wand, and delicious dishes automatically filled the long dining table. There was the tempting aroma of roasted turkey, mountains of pumpkin pie, and all sorts of magical candies and drinks. The Weasley family sat together happily. Ron was excitedly discussing new Quidditch tactics with Harry, and Hermione was happily looking at the two grown boys. Arthur was talking with Sirius with great interest about his experiences in purchasing supplies in the Muggle world today, and their laughter echoed in the hall. The Longbottom family sat nearby, and Neville Longbottom was no longer the timid boy he used to be. With a confident smile, he enthusiastically discussed the new discoveries in herbal medicine with his grandmother. Alice Longbottom looked at her son tenderly, her eyes full of pride. When everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, Mrs. Weasley took out the Christmas gifts she had knitted herself. Ron got a new sweater with his initials embroidered on it. He put it on with a helpless expression. Hermione and Harry received a warm scarf, which they knew was a token of Mrs. Weasley's love for him. Aiden took out the gift he had made earlier, an exquisite bracelet that seemed to have a crystal gem on the top. What is this? Ron asked curiously. Protective item. When the person wearing this ornament receives fatal damage, the dream inside will replace the attack for you. Aiden explained, after all, alchemical items made by combining abilities and magic are surprisingly powerful. As soon as he finished speaking, the way everyone looked at this thing changed. Isn't this too expensive? Asked Frank Longbottom. For a Christmas gift, give me something practical. It doesn't have to be expensive. After all, I made it myself. Aiden lightly mentioned the value of the bracelet. After hearing what Aiden said, everyone accepted the gift and secretly decided to give Aiden a valuable gift in return next time. Hermione gave Aiden a notebook that would automatically say inspirational words when he opened it. And the scarf that Mrs. Molly sent was still the one she knitted herself. Arthur gave Aiden a complete toolbox, although judging from his look, he might borrow it soon. Harry sent a set of perfume. Seriously? Aiden raised an eyebrow. After all, I really couldn't think of what to give you, so Ron suggested giving you a bottle of perfume. He also said you would like it. The honest child sold out his little friend in one go. Really? I like it very much. Aiden smiled brightly at Harry, but Ron behind him unexpectedly felt the approach of death. Outside, Errol flies in through the window and Percy returns the gift that Madame Molly sent. Molly was so sad that she burst into tears at the height of the festive atmosphere, and Arthur kept comforting her. Aiden's eyes narrowed slightly, and a man called the President walked out from the streets of London and quietly came to Percy's residence near the Houses of Parliament. Chapter 293, End of Vacation, Training, Prison Break. The Christmas-winter vacation has come to the last few days, and Sirius has been depressed all day because he has to part with Harry. The negative energy he exuded made everyone in the house feel depressed. Mrs. Molly's assessment of him was that he was having a depressive episode. Sirius, how about I stay? Harry actually had some fear in his heart. After all, he could still accompany his godfather at Grimmauld Place, but returning to school would be surrounded by bad things. At night, an unexpected person visited Grimmauld Place. Sirius pushed open the door, and his already droopy face became even more sullen. Unfortunately, Snape was also a member of the Order of the Phoenix, so Sirius had to welcome him into the old house. What are you doing here? Sirius looked at him with disgust. Because, these two arrogant father and son always turned a deaf ear to other people's warnings, so I had to waste my precious time to clean up after them. Snape's tone was steady and dull, causing Sirius to frown. Well, don't waste time, Harry Potter, come with me, Snape ordered. Harry, who was standing next to him, was horrified and the chess piece in his hand was almost eaten by Ron. "Wait," Sirius shouted, standing up and grabbing Snape by the collar. "If I knew that you were bullying Harry under the pretext of teaching. Oh, I don't have unlimited free time like you, but Mr. Potter should be as thick-skinned as his father. A little scolding won't have much impact." The corner of Snape's mouth curled up slightly, and Sirius pointed his wand directly at Snape. A dragon carrying Fat House water also walked in at this time and saw the two people at loggerheads. Snap! Aiden snapped his fingers, and the soothing move began. The rising hostility between the two seemed to be poured with a bucket of cold water. "Okay, Sirius, it was my suggestion from the beginning that Harry learn occlumency. Your teaching progress is indeed a bit too slow," Aiden said to Sirius first. Then he looked back at Snape. "Professor, use legilimency to forcibly break through the subject's mental defenses. If the other party resists, your memory will also be discovered by the recipient, you should know that," Aiden hinted. "Humph." Teacher Si folded his arms across his chest and snorted coldly. "I knew he." Sirius tried to get up again, but was slapped by Aiden and couldn't get up. "Okay, Harry, follow the professor. You have to learn the art of occlumency." Aiden turned his gaze to Harry. Finally, Harry reluctantly walked towards Snape. Over the next few days, Harry practiced occlumency with Snape every day. Before each day's class began, Snape would extract all of his memories and place them in the pensieve. Then it was his fun time, forcing legilimency on Harry. When Harry dragged his tired body back to Grimmauld Place, he saw Ron and Hermione playing chess together, which made him feel even more jealous. But such days did not last long, and soon it was time to go back to school. On the last night of the holiday, everyone had dinner together. Mundungus, Moody, and Tonks also arrived at Grimmauld Place. Sirius didn't want to spoil everyone's fun, so he kept forcing a smile. Not only does he support Gemini, he also picks food for everyone. But Harry noticed that in between his laughter, Sirius would occasionally look downcast. As the morning turned to say goodbye, Harry suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. "Sirius!" Harry was about to remind him, but he had already been pushed into the car. On the night bus, Moody and Tonks threatened Stan Shunpike not to reveal Harry's name. Aiden watched the show from the side. At the gate of Hogwarts, Lupin and Tonks helped everyone carry their luggage, and the dragon next to them seemed to smell something between them. The new semester begins and the Geminis start selling their new props again. Throughout the winter vacation, the two of them pestered Aiden to analyze his abilities. At first Aiden thought they were just joking, but as time went on, the two actually achieved some results. Invisibility cloaks in the wizarding world are mostly for one's own invisibility. The Geminis used their discovery that Aiden's invisibility came from his mental neglect of an object to successfully develop an invisibility cap. When worn, this hat can hide the user's entire head, and even Hermione admires them for this. "So, what's the potential of this product?" George raised an eyebrow at Aiden. "It will definitely sell well." Aiden knew what they meant, but pretended to be ignorant. "So, our beautiful little brother, can you give us some additional investment?" Fred came over and hooked his arm around Aiden's shoulders. "You two are here to introduce the concept product to the shareholders." Aiden smiled. But he still took out a bag of about 200 galleons and handed it to them. "The boss is generous." The two men took the purse and disappeared in an instant. On the other side, Azkaban. A Death Eater sneaked into the Dementors' habitat and successfully contacted their leader. Voldemort promised the Dementors that when he came to power, they would be free to take advantage of other people's happiness. Thus, the greatest escape in Azkaban's history took place. Bellatrix and Dolohov escaped from prison with a dozen Death Eaters. Voldemort was very pleased with this, and his joy was even transmitted to Harry through the connection of their souls. Of course, this rampage not only means the defection of the Dementors, but also means that the armed forces of the Ministry of Magic are further weakened. The old guard at the Ministry of Magic sprang into action, and the propaganda machine went into full swing. The Ministry of Magic has alerted the Muggle government. The Death Eaters have escaped from prison. Have they really escaped? Everything is under control, and with Fudge, there is nothing to worry about. Of course, we highly suspect that this operation was planned by a prisoner who had escaped from Azkaban before Peter Pettigrew. Fudge stood on the dais, trying his best to show off his limited vocabulary. In contrast, the Lestrange family praised Fudge as much as possible through various publicity channels. Inside Hogwarts, Aiden smiled while holding a newspaper, while Edmund next to him snatched the newspaper from him. What exactly do you want to do? You are still trying to boost Fudge's reputation at this time. Do you want him to win the election this year? Edmund asked, puzzled. How is that possible? Have you completed the withdrawal of funds and personnel? Aiden asked back. It's done, but the price is too high. Edmund complained. Where's the new newspaper? What's it going to be called? Aiden snatched the newspaper from Edmund's hand. It's called Wizard Daily. Edmund rolled his eyes at him unhappily. Then let's just wait for the show to begin. Aiden smiled. Chapter 294, The End of a Relationship, Freelance Writer, Review. The prison break of a large number of Death Eaters also made people in the wizarding world realize that something was wrong. Because the people who escaped were all familiar to the young wizards, Harry's reputation in the school began to improve. After the Death Eaters escaped from prison, Umbridge's control over the school became increasingly strict, and she issued Educational Order No. 26. Professors are prohibited from discussing anything unrelated to the course in class. After school started, Chu took the initiative to find Harry and asked him to go to Hogsmeade on Valentine's Day. Oh, of course. Are we going to discuss the Dream Chaser? Harry replied dully. Humph. Chu was so angry at this unromantic man that she turned around and left. Harry realized later that she was inviting him to a date and hurriedly chased after her. The two came to Hogsmeade together, where the windows were covered with wanted posters of Death Eaters. Mrs. Putafoot's tea shop was surrounded by couples kissing each other. The atmosphere between Harry and Chu Jong was very awkward, and he had no idea what to say. Later, in order to ease the awkward atmosphere, Harry said, would you like to come with me to the Three Broomsticks later? I'm going to see Hermione at noon. Cho raised an eyebrow. You want to see Hermione Granger? Today? Yes, she asked me to go. Do you want to come with me? She said it's okay. Humph. She's so nice. But from Chu's tone, she didn't feel good at all. On the contrary, her voice was cold and distant all of a sudden. Soon the two started arguing, and Chu accused Harry of dating her since he had already dated another girl. Then she left crying, and Harry paid the bill in frustration, not knowing what the problem was from beginning to end. Hala rubbed his head and headed for the Three Broomsticks, where Hermione, Aiden, Edmund, and Luna were already waiting for him. Harry. Seeing the older boy appear, Hermione waved to him. Harry walked over and sat down. After a while, a poor woman pushed the door and walked in. With her fate controlled by a dream weaver, Rita Skeeter hasn't written those gossips for a long time. This caused her status to plummet, which is probably an example of how those who manipulate public opinion will eventually be manipulated by it. Okay, Ms. Rita Skeeter, we need you to write about Harry's battle against Volume. You know who? Hermione invited Rita to write for Harry. But I'm now excluded from the Daily Prophet, and Fudge keeps blocking my writing qualifications. Rita spread her hands helplessly. We can provide some help on this. Aiden sat up straight. He extended his hand and gave Edmund a white check, and Edmund handed Aiden a document and glared at him. We have a new newspaper here, and we would like to invite you to become our special contributor. Aiden handed the document to Rita. Speaking of which, the feeling of playing two roles by one person is really amazing. What? You're going to start a newspaper? Hermione's political sense made her sense something. Of course, you can also write content about the protection of house elves' rights and interests and post it on it. In the wizarding world, you can be politically inactive, but you can't be without a life. The key to becoming a politician in the wizarding world is to become a clown for the audience to enjoy. Aiden narrowed his eyes. The clown is so ugly. Hermione muttered. Obviously, Cornelius Fudge is a typical example of a person who has no life. Edmund's tone was full of mockery. Maybe he was just caught in the larvae hook. Luna said something without any context. Okay, Ms. Rita, now you need to use your abilities to write content in the newspaper that can arouse the audience. Aiden set the tone for the gathering, and a brand new newspaper was born on this crowded bar table. Harry told Rita all the details he could remember. Luna and Rita left with the manuscript, and Harry followed everyone back to school with doubts. Wouldn't this kind of tabloid make my words seem even less credible? Harry looked at Aiden puzzledly. What do you think are the three main elements of news communication? Aiden asked. Accurate, authentic, and timely. The top student Hermione gave the answer. Edmund. Aiden called out to a certain media tycoon. Contradictory, explosive, and out of context. Obviously, Edmund had a different answer. But you are. Hermione was about to scold, but then she thought of something and fell into deep thought. This is the fastest way to create a buzz and spread the news, Aiden explained to her. Well, it can only be used once, to fight Voldemort. Apparently young Miss Granger had not realized what she had opened. The innocent savior standing by was confused. He shook his head and threw these things away. After all, Ravenclaws always speak in a vague way. By the way, Hermione, I want to ask you. Harry suddenly remembered the unpleasant experience he had with Chujong before. There just so happens that there are 2 Ravenclaws here, and I'd like to ask for their opinions. He recounted what happened between him and Chujong at Madame Putafoot's tea house and asked himself what he had done wrong. My God, are all Gryffindor people so honest? Edmund stared at him in disbelief. Hermione was amused by her eldest son's straightforwardness. Het. You are so stupid that you actually said you were going to meet another girl while you were dating Chu. Mother He's tone was filled with disappointment. But you're not another girl, I mean, you're Hermione. Harry couldn't understand such complicated feelings at all. Don't you understand? Do you want to experience it? Aiden suddenly suggested. Try it. Harry was a little expectant. Hermione and Edmund were also very interested. With a snap of fingers, several people felt themselves being wrapped by clouds. Is this the training room? Hermione looked at the surroundings. To be precise, this is my dream. Are you ready? Aiden grinned. A cloud flew over and squeezed directly into the bodies of the 3 people. Then, Harry felt a sharp pain in his heart. Jealousy, resentment, sadness, and other emotions emerged from the bottom of his heart. Harry grabbed the clothes on his chest and stood there in a daze. Hermione beside her had already started crying, and Edmund also looked as pale as death. Wow, Aiden, stop it, wow. In the end, Edmund couldn't hold it back and started crying as well. Aiden raised his hand, and the clouds were pulled out of their minds and released to comfort them. I have to go and apologize to her. After recovering, Harry finally realized what he had done. Hermione nodded, but still looked embarrassed. Aiden looked at Edmund in a joking manner, which made the young master shudder. What? Edmund looked at him unwillingly. I didn't expect you to be surprisingly innocent. Aiden teased. With Edmund's middle finger, the few people left the dream. Chapter 295, Exposed and Leaving. The DOS training was carried out in an orderly manner, and Aiden even specially found a few former members of the Duel Association. They taught Aiden spells to the DA members and assisted Harry in teaching the Patroness. After a period of practice, most people in DA can use basic defensive magic. And several core members are able to summon their own physical Patroness. Expecto Patroness. Ginny pointed her wand, and a silver-white horse flew out from the tip of her wand. Ron's Patroness is a hound, while Hermione's is an otter and Luna's is a rabbit. On Friday, something big happened at Hogwarts. Due to Marietta Emick's betrayal, Umbridge and her picket team captured Ron, Hermione, Ginny, the twins and Harry. And by illegally using Truth Serum, he extracted the secrets of their dreams. At the same time, Umbridge gathered a large number of Aurors and rushed into Hogwarts, trying to arrest the prisoner, Aiden Pruitt. A dozen Aurors holding wands, led by Percy, brought Aiden to the principal's office. Cornelius, what I told you at the beginning was right. Look at these dream chasers. They are forming an army, just like the Death Eaters. Umbridge chattered to Fudge. She stuffed a large stack of testimonies into Fudge's hands, and the Aurors beside her stood ready. We have seen through your scheme to seize power in the Ministry of Magic. The so-called mysterious man is nothing but a lie you created. At this moment, there were more than a dozen Aurors standing behind Umbridge, and she was roaring like a chihuahua with full confidence. No, Professor, I formed it. Harry felt very guilty. If it weren't for him, Aiden wouldn't have fallen to this point. It's a bit itchy, how about you loosen the shackles for me? Aiden raised the shackles on his hands with a playful smile. Be quiet. Didn't I remind you to stay away from him? Now it's all right. Percy replied coldly, but Aiden could see the worry in his eyes. It's not hopeless yet. Aiden's mouth curled up slightly. Harry, you are brave, but as they say, Dumbledore was ready to take the blame. But suddenly he found that Aiden's presence had become so huge that no one present could ignore him. Yes, just like the evidence they confessed in the truth serum, everything was ordered by me. Long was sitting on the sofa, shackled and pointed at by dozens of wands, but even though he was in such a helpless state, no one dared to ignore him. So, what can you do to me? Aiden raised his head, his heterochromatic pupils shone like the sun, and no one could look him in the eye. That's enough! Fudge shouted with all his courage. Dawlish, Shacklebolt, send him to Azkaban to await trial for conspiracy to rebel. Fudge folded the testimony carefully and put it in his arms. Dumbledore, do you have anything else to say? Umbridge waited for him, hoping that Dumbledore would wade into this muddy water. Although he didn't know what Aiden wanted to do, the tacit understanding they had gained over the years made Dumbledore realize that Aiden wanted him to remain silent. And you, Pruitt, are you sure that everything is your intention and no one is instructing you? Umbridge looked at Aiden. She took out a small crystal bottle from her bosom, and everyone knew what was inside without her saying anything. I believe this thing will help you remember something. Umbridge approached Aiden with the crystal bottle. I don't think I made it clear before I put on the shackles that we had no intention of surrendering without a fight, and I certainly had no intention of going to Azkaban. After all, I don't want to tell my junior classmates when I meet them in the future. Hi, hello, welcome to Azkaban, I am your senior, Aiden Pruitt. Aiden smiled and shook his head, scratching his cheek with his shackled hand. Hold him down, Umbridge ordered. Percy and another Auror came up and tried to catch Aiden. You asked for this, Brother Percy. The dragon gave him a bright smile. Then, with a clang, he used brute force to tear open the shackles on his hands. This is Mithril. Percy's eyes widened, but he was punched in the face by Aiden. He flew out and hit the cabinet in the principal's office, but because the cabinet cast a protective magic, Percy was bounced back and fell to the ground. The Aurors around were stunned by the scene and hurriedly raised their wands to restrain Aiden. Aiden blew a breath, and his mental breath turned into a storm that swept across the entire office. A layer of frost covered the glass, and more than a dozen Aurors fell unconscious. Coming up to Umbridge, Aiden grabbed her collar and lifted her up. Bite your teeth. I won't heal you this time. Aiden smashed Umbridge's toad face hard with his fist, and at the same time, the hypnosis that was lifted made her recall the last time she was beaten. The power of Sequence 3 made Umbridge feel as if she was hit by a high-speed train. Aiden smashed the floor with one punch and knocked Umbridge from her office to the next floor. She fell straight into the pit and was caught by the rotating staircase at the bottom. She didn't know which floor she fell to. Wow, it feels so refreshing. Aiden felt relieved, and all the depression that had been accumulated in his heart for days was released. So, what are you going to do now? Dumbledore hooked his fingers and cast a forgetfulness spell on Fudge. You're pretty mean, too. Aiden teased. I can't always let them bully me. Tell me about you. Dumbledore didn't care about Fudge. Professor McGonagall also came in and found unconscious Aurors all over the floor. She quickly protected Potter and Marietta behind her. What the hell is going on? Dean Cat looked at Dragon and Bee angrily. The two looked at each other and smiled. Professor McGonagall, as you can see, I attacked these Aurors, and it was me who instructed Harry Potter to form an army to resist the Ministry of Magic. Aiden said half-jokingly. No, we can't do this. Professor McGonagall panicked. Come on, we have to find a place to hide you, and then... She immediately began to arrange her funeral. Minerva, there is no need to panic, Dumbledore comforted her. Panic? Look at what they have done to the school. If they continue like this, Hogwarts will be destroyed in our hands. Professor McGonagall scolded Dumbledore. Okay, Professor, thank you for your concern. I have to go out and hide for a while. As for the issue of reputation, leave it to Professor Dumbledore. Aiden smiled, turned into a puff of smoke, and disappeared into the office. Well, it seems I have to go visit some old friends. Minerva, protect the students. Dumbledore glanced at him, then disappeared amid the cry of a phoenix. Dumble. Professor McGonagall wanted to keep him, but he disappeared. Chapter 296. Miss Witch, a trip to Northern Europe. In Nocturne Alley, a slightly embarrassed figure appeared in the office of the Queen of Dark Wizards. The famous Mr. Pruitt would be so embarrassed. A young woman beside his seat poured him a cup of tea. I didn't expect that being rejected by the sea of collective subconsciousness would feel like this. Aiden brushed the dust off his robe. God knows how many accidents he encountered along the way that should have been coincidences. He picked up the tea handed to him by Arthur C. and took a sip. Then he leaned back and relaxed on the sofa. What's wrong? Arthur came over and gently massaged his temples. The giant has fallen towards Senior Tom. I'm afraid I'll have to make another trip to Northern Europe. Aiden took a deep breath. Why bother with so much effort? If you are really tired, just find a place to hide. Voldemort won't be able to find you. A trace of heartache flashed in Arthur's eyes. So that I can move forward on my own path. Aiden smiled at her. Sequence. Arthur murmured. Well, it's time for me to leave for Northern Europe. You should be careful in Diagon Alley. Aiden reached out and grabbed the hat. I want to go too. Arthur held Aiden's shoulders and prevented him from getting up. What are you going to do? Aiden asked curiously. Anyway, it's my responsibility in the end, so it's better to let me participate from the beginning to facilitate the coordination of affairs. Arthur looked at Aiden jokingly. Well, then you come. A dragon looked away guiltily. Nocturne Alley, send someone to take over. Arthur C. said while packing her luggage. Well, this is not a big problem. Aiden snapped his fingers, and more silver-white threads separated from his body, forming a human figure. As the silk threads were woven, a big sister with a beautiful face and curvy figure appeared. Tisk, I didn't know you had this hobby. Arthur C. smiled sideways. It's an identity I used before. Aiden scratched his head. You've played a woman. Arthur C. was surprised and began to think about the possibility of becoming good sisters with him. No. Long rejected it decisively, it's those bastards who think I am. Wait, heterochromatic pupils, extraordinary beauty, a bit like a teacher in the history of Hogwarts. Our family once had a record of her. Arthur looked at Aiden suspiciously. That's me. For some special reasons, I went back in time and participated in the founding of Hogwarts. Said the silver-haired elder sister. Aiden raised his hand and made a look gesture. It's pretty good, but there are still some differences in appearance. Arthur C. put the things away and stuffed them into her pocket. The special clothing of the Dusk Hermits has been laid out. In addition to the built-in protection, transformation, and cleansing functions, Aiden thoughtfully installed a traceless extension spell in their pockets. This employment benefit made the silent man next door cry with envy, and many young ladies planned to change jobs on the spot, but were stopped by the director in the end. It's okay, she is the phantom of the Dream Weaver. Aiden smiled mysteriously. Then, the silver-haired sister began to shrink and slowly transformed into Arthur C's appearance. How is it? Are they similar? Arthur C. turned around and made a yeah gesture to Arthur C. Look a little more indifferent. There are other things I still need to teach you. Arthur walked over with a cold face and pulled Miss Witch into a compartment. France, a man and a woman are walking on the streets of Paris. Originally, Aiden was planning to experience the charm of the Seine River with Arthur C. But a kind-hearted old white man with the Paris flag persuaded Aiden to stop. After all, more than 100 years of industrial emissions have made local residents realize that the banks of the Seine are no longer the romantic place praised by poets 100 years ago. Helplessly, Aiden went to the Polish border through a French smuggling group and passed through Minsk. After many twists and turns, we arrived at the border between Northern Europe and Eastern Europe. Outside the giant village, Aiden and Arthur stood at the door. The two giant gatekeepers crossed their swords to form a large door directly in front of Aiden and Arthur C. I come with good intentions, hoping to meet your leader. Aiden snapped his fingers, and a lot of treasures and huge armor fell from the sky. These gifts were made by Aiden using his alchemical hands while he was traveling these past 2 days. As for the inexplicable disappearance of steel bars on ordinary people's construction sites, Aiden didn't know the reason. Wait. One of the giants turned and walked into the village. After a while, Aiden and Arthur were brought into the village. The giant's village is more like an open-air camp than a village. The tall giant has no concept of house at all. Even the clothes that cover the body are made of wild animal fur. Due to improper hygiene management, the entire camp exudes a smell that is no less than that of British towns thousands of years ago. Aiden has become somewhat immune to this due to his experience in the Middle Ages. What was surprising was that Arthur C. could walk in without changing her expression. It seemed that she had experienced a lot during her time in Nocturne Alley. Wizard, what are you doing here? The leader of the giants came out dragging a wild boar. As he walked, he put the wild boar into his mouth and chewed it. His appearance of eating raw meat and drinking blood made Aiden a little confused. Giant, we come here with sincerity, hoping that you can give up the Death Eaters and join forces with us. Aiden explained his purpose. After hearing this, the giant leader gave a strange smile. They promised to seize power and kill people at will. What can you promise? The giant leader stared at Aiden and the other man with wide eyes, with a greedy look emerging in his eyes. At the same time, the surrounding giants also began to get ready, waiting for the leader's orders at any time. I have heard that giants consider strength as beauty, and that the defeated will give everything to the winner. Arthur stepped forward and told her about the tradition of the giants. So, you want to challenge me? The giant leader laughed loudly and slapped his thighs continuously, and the giants next to him also laughed. Don't you dare accept my challenge, a weak woman. Arthur challenged. Wizard, you are playing with fire. The giant leader stopped laughing and looked down at Arthur. He then turned his gaze to Aiden. What about you, a man hiding behind a woman? The giant leader looked at Aiden provocatively. Although the giant race uses all of their magic power to strengthen their bodies, it is obvious that this leader is a character who possesses both strength and wisdom. He keenly discovered the subordinate relationship between the two and made Aiden, who was in charge of financial management, the primary target. Her opinion is my opinion, and I will pay the ransom if she loses the battle, Aiden smiled. Humph. Seeing that his provocation was useless, the giant leader snorted coldly. Chapter 297. In the giant village, Arthur is confronting a giant holding an axe. Just a machete? Aiden asked softly. That's enough. Watch out for you. Arthur patted her robe, and the silk threads on the robe changed, and a set of tight black clothes appeared on her. Let's put this dress into the bet. The giant leader suggested with his head tilted in the stands next to him. Of course, if we lose, this warrior will belong to us. Aiden raised his eyebrows. Okay, as long as you don't use magic to cheat. The giant leader nodded and smiled with satisfaction. After all, how could a girl fight a giant in hand-to-hand combat? Start! A giant who looked like a referee beat the drum. With a bang, the giant with an axe rushed towards Arthur. He raised the axe high and chopped at Arthur with all his might. Arthur leaned slightly to the side, causing the giant's axe to hit the ground, splashing mud all over the ground. The giant swung the axe across Arthur's waist, trying to cut her in two. Arthur also raised her scimitar and rushed towards the giant's axe. The scimitar and the giant axe collided with each other with a whistling sound. The leader of the giants had already stood up expectantly, wanting to see the result he expected. Dang flames burst out from the place where the scimitar and the giant axe collided, and then the two men were bounced away by each other's force. How is this possible? The giant leader couldn't believe what he saw. A wizard who is equal in strength to a giant without performing any magic. Are you prepared? The giant leader thought, and then glanced at Aiden. A leisurely dragon took out the lemon juice and took a sip, a refreshed look on his face. Inside the field, Arthur raised her head and looked into the eyes of the giant, and combat hypnosis was activated. The giant raised the axe and wanted to swing it again, but he suddenly felt an unpleasant feeling on the 5 knuckles holding the axe. He simply let go of the axe handle, and the axe was thrown out of the field. Arthur took the opportunity to kick the ground and appeared in front of the giant. Because this was the subordinate she wanted to capture, Arthur slipped away. She punched the giant on the head, her slender body forming a contrast with the giant's huge head. But the giant was knocked unconscious by Arthur's punch and then fell to the ground. What? The giant leader's eyes widened with anger. Then according to the agreement, this warrior will belong to us. Aiden narrowed his eyes. He raised his right hand, and the levitation spell lifted the giant and flew behind Aiden. Arthur came over with satisfaction, her delicate little face covered in dust, her clothes stained with mud, and her demeanor very wild. Aiden took out a handkerchief and wiped her, then turned his gaze back to the giant leader. Are you going to continue? This time it was Aiden's turn to provoke. No way, the famous giant was defeated by a little girl. It turns out that the dragon's method of provoking is slightly better than that of the giant leader. Soon, another giant with red eyes stood up to challenge Arthur. Arthur was not to be outdone and knocked them down one by one. As the number of unconscious giants behind Aiden increased to 6, the giant leader finally could not sit still anymore. After all, those who were captured were all his subordinates, and there were still some giants who were grateful to the former leader. If he loses too much of his base, he might face another rebellion. After weighing the pros and cons, he decided to overturn the table. That's enough, you despicable wizards, you used magic secretly. The giant leader pulled out his big knife and put it on Aiden's neck. Don't move. Picking up Aiden, the giant leader threatened Arthuri. Excellent female warrior, I hope you can stay in our village. With your blood and the blood of our giants, we will surely give birth to invincible warriors. This giant leader could actually make promises, which made Aiden marvel. However, hearing this, Arthur's face darkened again, and some bad memories came to her mind. Snap! Arthuri snapped her fingers, and the two giants were instantly hypnotized and rushed towards the giant leader. What? The giant leader was startled and immediately let go of Aiden, raising his weapon to fight off his suddenly rebellious subordinates. After a fierce fight, he fought 1 against 2 and cut off the head of his men. Roar! He roared at the other giants, re-establishing his majesty. You actually have this ability. The giant leader also understood and looked at Arthuri even more greedily. You just want to watch. Arthuri swept her calm eyes over Aiden. Aiden knew that she had almost reached the limit of her patience, so he nodded and walked forward. In front of the giant leader, Aiden began to swell up. The shadow of the dragon covered the land, and after entering sequence 3, Aiden's mythical creature form became even larger. The mysterious symbols on the grey dragon flashed, and the giants felt some strange thoughts rising in their hearts. The dragon flapped its wings and flew into the sky, opening its mouth and spewing out invisible flames. The entire camp turned into a sea of fire in an instant, and the giants fled outside crying. Through the ripples of the ocean of collective subconsciousness, Aiden has been able to perceive the thoughts of these giants without invading them with virtual personalities. Aiden quickly locked onto the giants that were still hostile and flew towards them. The dragon's breath turned the giant leader into charcoal, and then wiped out several of his followers. Soon, the giants expressed their submission to the dragon before them. The shadow of a dragon descended from the sky, and Aiden appeared beside Arthuri. Okay, now it's up to our beautiful Miss Arthuri to trouble you. The thugs have gone to rest, and now it is the turn of the person in charge. Arthur walked up calmly and discussed compensation with the newly elected giant leader. Yes, you heard it right, it's compensation. Arthur, who has been hanging out in Nocturne Alley for many years, smelled something different. The giant leader must have gained some benefit by bringing his men to join Voldemort. After all, he didn't seem like the type who would be led around by a big shot. Unfortunately, his thugs killed him too quickly and he didn't have time to torture him. Now the only way to extract surplus value is through negotiation. The Lord of Nocturne Alley, the hypnotist Arthur Greengrass, quickly tricked the giants into revealing their hidden treasure. At the same time, they were forced to sign a contract to sell themselves. Arthur, who returned victorious, showed off to Aiden, stretched out her finger and hooked it, signaling him to follow. Let Rada take over the rest. Arthur explained. So, what did Senior Tom give them to make them so loyal to him? Aiden was a little curious. Arthur brought Aiden to a cave and blew open the entrance with a blasting spell. Inside the cave entrance, golden galleons filled the entire cave. Suddenly, Aiden saw a painting above one of the artifacts, which showed the Malfoy family crest. Here, this is the benefit. Arthur pointed to the Malfoy family emblem. The two dragons couldn't help laughing in the cave, and the laughter of the boy and girl dotted the dark cave. Chapter 298. In Hogwarts, due to Dumbledore's departure, Umbridge forced the issuance of an education order to make herself the acting headmaster of Hogwarts. However, the door to the headmaster's office locked automatically after Dumbledore left, and no one could get in. As the Wizarding Daily and the Quibbler continued to exert their influence, the people of the wizarding world became increasingly dissatisfied with Fudge. A large number of Howler letters were sent to Fudge, which put a lot of pressure on him, and then this pressure was added to Umbridge. Umbridge tried to force Harry to reveal Dumbledore's secrets by giving him Veritaserum several times. But Harry dodged them all. After Dumbledore left, the twins also made up their minds and prepared to leave. With the support of two wealthy men, Harry and Aiden, they had already bought a shop in Diagon Alley. In their last time in school, they are ready to burn their youth well. They first prepared a large amount of fireworks and then sold them all over the school. The little wizards would set off fireworks everywhere from time to time, which made Umbridge run around in a panic. The professors, on the other hand, watched Umbridge busy in silence. The two also cast a powerful spell in a hidden corridor. The combination of transfiguration and Aiden's dedicated extension spell allowed them to turn an entire corridor into a bottomless swamp. Enough! Who on earth is this, and why don't you professors stop the students' behavior? Umbridge yelled at other professors at lunch. If we remember correctly. Professor McGonagall pushed up her monocle. Your educational order number 29 seems to prohibit professors from doing anything that is not related to teaching. Professor Flitwick also pushed his monocle. Umbridge was shocked. She didn't know since when all professors started wearing monocles. She looked towards the student seats in horror. Rows of neatly aligned monocles were facing her, like the nightmare that had knocked her off the floor. Ah! Umbridge screamed and ran out. Ha ha ha! The students below burst into laughter. Silence! Professor McGonagall maintained order. Continue eating. The slightly raised corners of her mouth showed that she was in a good mood. At night, Chu Jong found Harry and wanted to explain to Marietta and asked Hermione to remove the curse from her. Marietta had been in the hospital for more than 10 days, but the traitor pustules on her face still hadn't disappeared, and even Madame Pomfrey, an excellent therapist, couldn't do anything about her. But Harry firmly disagreed with Chu's plea, and the two had a big quarrel and parted unhappily. On the other side, on the streets of Paris, light snow was falling on the ground. A blonde girl wearing a white windbreaker and a silver-haired boy wearing a black windbreaker were walking on the street. So, where are we going now? Asked Arthur curiously. Can't we just come out for a walk? The dragon attacked by the cold air looked a little lazy. Are you going to hibernate? Arthur teased. Well, we have to go to the ancestral land of the Lestrange family. I guess Bellatrix might be hiding here. Aiden explained slowly, but a frozen hand reached through his collar. A dragon trembled. Oh wow! Arthur gave a wicked smile. Then she was hit in the face by a puddle of snow, and the dragon holding a long staff raised an eyebrow at her. Aiden Pruitt, I'm going to fight you. Arthur picked up a snowball from the ground and threw it at Aiden. A snowball fight began, and two dragons with physical fitness far exceeding that of ordinary humans began throwing snowballs at each other. Until a snowball flew out and smashed through a nearby electric pole, the two of them stopped what they were doing at the same time. Let's get down to business. It is good. The two apparat to Lestrange's cemetery. The road leading to the center was blocked, and there seemed to be scorched earth burned by the fierce fire around it. Hell! Aiden murmured. What? Arthur's hearing naturally caught Aiden's words. Where do you think the fire of the fierce fire curse, which is difficult to extinguish and spreads automatically, comes from? Aiden did not answer her question directly, but asked a question in return. The fiery one, the devil's flame, the flame of hell. Arthur fell into deep thought. After a while, she raised her head, the king of the deep hell. Yes, this is proof that wizards have defeated them in the past. Aiden nodded. That's really amazing. Arthur exclaimed. But they also made this thing. Aiden rolled his eyes. The two walked through the cemetery and came to a small house nearby. The two dragons hid in the blind spot of consciousness together. There seemed to be many powerful black magic traps set up around the cabin. Aiden pointed his staff lightly at the ground, and a white circle of light spread out, paralyzing all the magic traps. There was a sudden movement in the house, and the space began to fold. But there was a bang, and it seemed that the person in the house was directly bounced out by the apparition. Arthur followed Aiden and broke into the interior directly, and sure enough, Bellatrix appeared in front of them. When the long staff was released, it automatically floated in the air. Outside the hut, countless silver white iron chains blocked the hut. Two dragons hiding in the consciousness emerged. It's you. Bellatrix had obviously obtained enough information from the outside world. You pure-blood traitors. Bella raised her wand and a green light flashed. Avada Kedavra. The killing curse was fired. Aiden, who was hit by the killing curse, disappeared like smoke, and a slender finger stretched out from the shadow and touched her wand. Then, Bellatrix felt as if all her magic was leaving her. This is impossible! She screamed frantically. You've become a muggle now. Think about how your master will treat you when he finds out about this. The gentle boy's voice echoed in her ears. Then, Voldemort's face appeared before her. Sorry, dear, you are no longer a wizard. Then Tom's beautiful face left Bella. No, no. Bellatrix curled up on the ground and cried. In reality, the two dragons sat on the sofa and watched the show in front of them. Tisk, this is too scary. It's exploring weaknesses and weaving illusions to silence the opponent. Arthur Sy roughly guessed the effect of the ability. It's okay. I just wove some painful memories into it. If I really want to persecute her, I can just use the memory of death. It caused a lot of negative energy to be generated in her heart, thus artificially giving birth to a silent master. Aiden shrugged. Then he saw black particles coming out of Bella, who was lying on the ground. Arthur Sy gave him a teasing look, and squinted in Bella's direction. Chapter 299. Return to the Forbidden Forest, encounter, centaurs. She had no choice but to help Bellatrix interpret the dream and clear away the bad memories. After all, Aiden still needed her to do something. A virtual personality quietly left and lurked on the island of her consciousness. Is she ours now? Arthur watched Aiden beating Bella. No, I need her original personality, and only let her explode at the critical moment. Aiden shook his head. What a pity. I was going to use her to intimidate those idiots in Nocturne Alley. Arthur Sy said with regret. Afterwards, the two left and Bella opened her eyes, finding herself lying on the sofa and seemed to have a nightmare. With a shudder, she quietly went out. After all, she was still tasked with recruiting men for the Dark Lord. Returning to England from Paris, Aiden sneaked into the Forbidden Forest. Among the many magical creatures, besides giants and goblins, the third big trouble was the centaurs. These creatures are capable of launching a rebellion and are the type that may be won over by Senior Tom. The giant has been dealt with by Aiden, and the goblin should have signed a mandatory contract and been put on fire. And Aiden's final target of this trip is the centaurs. As a race obsessed with prophecies, Aiden really hates them. After all, the grudge between the audience and the fortune tellers is well known to everyone. Seeing the real displeasure on Aiden's face, the considerate Arthur Sy came over and rubbed his face with her hands. What's wrong? Ashizi asked with concern. You'll know when you meet those guys. Aiden suppressed his unhappiness. Coincidentally, at a Quidditch match at Hogwarts, Hagrid tiptoed around trying to find Harry and Hermione. But his huge size knocked down many people, making him even more eye-catching. Hagrid waved to Harry and Hermione and asked them to come over. Hermione tilted her head and pointed at herself. Hagrid nodded vigorously, so Hermione pulled Harry, who was absorbed in watching the game, to find Hagrid. Hagrid led the two all the way to the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid, where are you taking us? Harry called out to Hagrid in front of him. Hagrid, what happened? Hermione also asked. I didn't want to trouble you, but since Dumbledore has left, I might be expelled at any time. I just don't feel comfortable leaving him here alone. Hagrid picked up a flower and pulled at the petals. It's really too dangerous to leave this guy to the little wizard. A young man's voice as pleasant as a clear spring sounded. Aiden. Hermione, Hagrid and Harry looked in the direction of the sound in surprise. Aiden and a girl they didn't know were sitting on a branch. Click, click, a giant walked out from behind the tree trunk and tried to reach out to catch the two dragons on the tree. Arthur Sy reached out and grabbed the giant's hand, then jumped down from the tree and threw the giant to the ground with one force. Then she took out her scimitar and decided to send the giant to heaven. Oh, stop it, please, this is my brother. Hagrid hurried over. Oh, really? I'm sorry. Arthur was stunned for a moment, then quickly hid the scimitar behind her and gave an awkward smile. Aiden also jumped down from the branch, winked at Arthur, and then a pair of white little hands reached out to Aiden's waist and twisted. Aiden's expression remained unchanged as he looked at the others. Aiden, where have you been these days? For a while, Harry felt extremely guilty about Aiden's departure because of his fault. Whenever I think of this incident, I feel so heartbroken that I often even wake up from my dreams. It's nothing. I've already messaged Aunt Molly. They know about my situation and that I've been doing well lately. You don't have to worry about me. Aiden winked at him. However, several shouting letters in Arthur Sy's office proved that Mrs. Molly was not calm. What are you doing now? Are you hiding from the Ministry of Magic? It was Hermione who grasped the key point immediately. No, we're dealing with magical creatures being recruited by Death Eaters. Arthur put away her scimitar and explained. Who are you? Hermione frowned. Arthur Greengrass. Arthur held out her hand and shook it, and then Hermione regained all her memories. Arthur, how is this possible, why would I? Hermione was a little confused by this sudden memory. Calm down, calm down. Arthur patted her back and comforted her. Arthur took Hermione to rest aside, while Harry, Aiden and Hagrid were watching Hagrid's giant brothers. He is my younger brother. I found him when I went to the gathering place of giants. My mother passed away. Grop is bullied by others because of his thin body. I can't just ignore him or he will die. Hagrid sobbed. We'll do our best to take care of him, Harry said, patting Hagrid's arm soothingly. Suddenly, the sound of horses running was heard from inside the Forbidden Forest. It must be the centaurs. They have become very dangerous recently. The Ministry of Magic has been restricting their territory recently. They may start a riot. Hagrid held the crossbow tightly in his hand. Okay, it's time for us to take action. Aiden waved to Arthur beside him. Aiden took out a letter and handed it to Harry, saying, "Give it to Snape." Arthur followed immediately, and the two of them disappeared with an apparition. Before leaving, Arthur waved to Hermione. "Who's that girl?" Harry asked. "A secret." Hermione winked at Harry and left the Forbidden Forest. Aiden and Arthur were about to go into the centaur settlement, but a group of centaurs jumped out from the surrounding bushes and pointed their bows and arrows at the two of them. "Why are there two people?" A burly centaur walked out, his tone full of confusion. Aiden opened his eyes and glanced at him, and the dragon's might knocked out the centaurs around him. Arthur also showed an unhappy look on her face. "Is this the prophecy?" Arthur frowned. "It must feel uncomfortable to be peeped at." Aiden raised his eyebrows at her. "But their predictions are not accurate either." Arthur changed the subject. "They can't detect me now. My body is now made up of dreams, and the tides of the collective subconscious ocean can hardly locate me." Aiden explained. "So if I want to avoid being locked in by the prophecy, I need to reach your current level." Arthur was a little crazy. Aiden hummed and took the lead to walk into the centaur tribe. Inside the tribe, two groups of horsemen are confronting each other. One group was led by Bane. They were equipped with armor and bows and arrows, and seemed ready to go out and kill. The other faction was led by Ronan, and they were unarmed. And from their expressions and the ripples in the ocean of their collective subconscious, Aiden learned that they were prepared to stop their compatriots from going to war with the wizards. Chapter 300, Creatures Hiding in the Mine Centaurs. Just as the situation on both sides became increasingly tense, two dragons intervened in the dispute. The internal conflict instantly turned into an external conflict, and the horsemen instantly looked at the two of them with a common hatred. Bane and Ronan walked over at the same time, signaling a temporary unity between the two factions. Aiden said nothing as he unfolded into the form of a mythical creature, the mysterious symbols on his body glowing faintly. Bane and Ronan's eyes widened for a moment, and soon the centaurs bent over to Aiden. "The controller of consciousness." Ronan touched his chest and walked up. "So, what are the centaurs' choices, destruction or submission?" The dragon opened its mouth, and a deep dream enveloped the centaurs, and they fell into the void. Led by Aiden, the centaurs and Arthur penetrated the boundary between reality and illusion, crossed the hazy fantasy and sank into the abyss. Finally, Aiden took him to the fifth level of the deep world, the spiral of pleasure. Here, Arthur saw the truest form of the centaurs. The truth before her ignited her brain and anger ran rampant in her heart. "How dare you!" Arthur took a few steps forward, with the green light flashing on her raised wand, and Aiden reached out and grabbed her. "As you can see, this is how we survive." Ronan lowered his head and stretched his hands back. Inside the spiral of joy, countless bizarre vines spiraled and intertwined with each other. In the middle of the vines protruded eggs, inside which newborn centaurs were soaked. But if you look from the inside out, you can see that inside the outermost row of eggs are complete human babies. From the outside to the inside, each egg constitutes the entire process of transformation from human to centaur. "Please calm down, two great dragons. This is just to give the dead children a chance. After all, this will allow them to see the world again." Bane was a little tough, but not much, and he still made an excuse for his own people. "Perhaps these children do not share the same idea as you. After all, not everyone wants to become the bait and guide of the king of the deep realm." Aiden finally uncovered the truth about the centaurs and the origin of their abnormal ability to actively connect to the collective subconscious ocean and conduct observations. If it weren't for the Eastern wizards who captured lives, I'm afraid you would be nothing more than batches of sacrifices. Now you are talking about continuity and ethnicity without any shame, you are a bunch of cowards hiding in your consciousness. Aiden had a mocking look on his face, while Bane and Ronan could only smile bitterly. This is the decision of our ancestors after all. We have no say in it. But this is the only way for us to survive. Please, show some mercy. Ronan knelt down with his front hooves towards Aiden, and Bane hesitated for a moment, then knelt down as well. Forget it. I came here today just to get an answer from you. Aiden narrowed his eyes. You go ahead. The two responded at the same time. Are the centaurs preparing to start a riot? Or, are you preparing to turn to the Death Eaters? The Dreamweaver's pressure was released, and the oppression from the higher-ups made it difficult for the centaurs to breathe. No, we absolutely won't. Bane said with difficulty. Great Dragon of the Heart, let them go. A soft voice appeared behind Aiden. Aiden turned around and saw a centaur emitting white light appearing here. Firenze. Aiden said the name of the person. I am willing to swear on behalf of everyone that I will never take the initiative to become an enemy of wizards. And when there is a civil war among wizards, we will remain neutral, okay? Firenze asked. Stop it, you are a racial. Bane wanted to say something, but was stunned by Aiden's look. Aiden raised his hand, motioning for Firenze to continue. Firenze opened his hands, a golden oath flew out of his body, and then the white light on his body disappeared. The oath flew towards Aiden and was crushed by him, and then golden particles directly covered the entire deep world. Firenze, you bastard, do you know how many of us have longed to become one race? Bane's eyes turned red and he grabbed Fezren's neck fiercely. Ronan, who was standing next to him, grabbed Ben's hand to prevent him from strangling Fezren. Take care of yourself. Aiden turned back into human form. He had no interest in getting involved in the subsequent dispute among the centaurs, so he pulled Arthursi out of the deep world. On the way to Nocturne Alley, Arthursi kept secretly observing Aiden. Go ahead, what do you want to ask? Aiden glanced at him. Why don't you destroy those disgusting guys? Arthuri came up and prepared to learn from a certain outstanding failed student. The existence of centaurs is necessary. After they die, their bodies and souls return to the deep world and become the king of the deep world, the nourishment of life. Especially since that thing has been made into a weapon by the Eastern wizards to fight against the deep realm, so although this cycle of the centaurs is sad, it can continuously strengthen the wizard's strength. Aiden explained. Arthuri fell silent. Because this is a classic trolley problem. If these dead are not used, then the fight against the king of the deep must sacrifice the living. Aiden knew that she could adjust her mentality, so he didn't make any noise to disturb her. Back to Diagon Alley, during the time that Arthursi was away, Miss Witch handled things very well. Otherwise, you can stay here and let me have a good vacation. Arthursi teased. No, sister, no, Mom. Miss Witch immediately rushed over and hugged Arthursi's thighs. Let me tell you, these idiots from Nocturne Alley. Then, the witch lady began to complain incessantly. It is not easy to manage these wizards whose brains have been damaged by black magic, especially those troublemakers with ulterior motives. Some people even tried to set traps for Miss Witch several times. Fortunately, as the incarnation of the Sequence 3 Dreamweaver, she can easily see through their thoughts and avoid them again and again. Ah! Arthur sighed. Didn't I tell you not to show weakness, otherwise they will think you have an opportunity to take advantage of them. Arthursi touched the witch's head. Because. Miss Witch lowered her head. Because her legend and corresponding identity are originally a witch who can drive away pain and disease, it is not surprising that she is not good at fighting. Seeing her hesitant, Aiden added for her. Still playing. Aiden raised his eyebrows. No, 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 let's stop it. Miss Witch immediately rushed towards Aiden and turned into strands of white silk threads and merged into his body. Oh, you're not good at fighting. What about me? Arthursi teased. Ahem, the letter I sent to Snape should have arrived. I'll go find him now. A dragon fled in panic. Hat. An ambiguous laugh was heard, followed by the sound of writing in the office.